Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
One Piece Fates Intertwined by Demonheart 12. What if the time difference between Luffy and Robin was much smaller? What would happen if he arrived on her island somehow before the Buster Call happened? How will their presence in each other's lives affect each other? Follow their adventures as they grow together and sail the seas in hopes of achieving their dreams. I don't own anything. Adios.
Freeing the crew, Usopp looked at everyone and said in a quiet voice, "Alright, does everyone know what role they have in the plan is?" The others nodded their heads. "Alright, let's do this and free Luffy and the others." Sanji took a puff of smoke. "Alright, I'll do this, but one of you needs to take care of the girl because there is no way I'm going to hit a lady. I'd rather burn in hell. Hitting a lady is not something a man would do. I will never hit a girl." Usopp looked at him and said, "I'll make sure that I bring beautiful flowers to your grave when they find your dead body after a girl kills you. I really hate this of yours." The blonde-haired looked at the long-nosed man with a harsh glare that made chills travel through his spine. Robin said, "But we'll have to free Luffy first. After that, I'll handle the little girl. My powers are the best to handle her since I can beat her from distance." She looked at Vivi. "Are you sure her power doesn't work from distance?" Vivi quickly replied, "Yes, I'm sure. Ms. Goldenweek needs to be at a reasonable distance, or else her color emotion power won't reach you and affect you. I think that she needs you to be in close range for her powers to work. She needs to paint the symbol on you, so if she can't see you, she won't be able to affect you." Robin nodded her head and looked at Usopp. "Are we ready, Usopp?" The long-nosed boy smiled as he pushed a finger to his chest saying, "I will always be ready. Now, let's begin Operation Free our crewmates." He then opened his bag and took out a couple of pellets and said, "Let's move. First Robin, you know what you need to do." With Luffy, the boy was currently sitting with Ms. Goldenweek as she poured tea to him and said with a small smirk, "Do you want to drink more tea?" The girl wouldn't admit it, but she was enjoying it since Luffy called her a little girl and she took it personally. The boy smiled like a dope. "Yes, please. This tea is really amazing. It is really tasty." From the side, Mr. 3 was becoming impatient as he taped his foot on the ground. He looked at the sun and heard another volcano explode. This was the third volcano that exploded since they caught the giants, and he started with his masterpiece. The man then dragged a hand through his face. "What the hell is taking those two idiots so much? It's only a princess with her duck and one pirate girl. They get attacked by some dinosaur that managed to take them out of the game?" The man stood there thinking about this and said, "I guess that would make sense since those aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. They should have been finished by now." He looked at his partner and said, "What do you think is taking them so long, Ms. Goldenweek?" The girl sipped her tea. After a minute of silence, she looked at him and said, "Maybe they got defeated by the pirates. I mean, it seems ridiculous that they have a crew of 4 people." Mr. 3 scoffed at the notion. "Still, even if they had more members, I'm sure that even those buffoons can take them down. Sure, they aren't criminal masterminds, but they aren't that pathetic." He then remembered that they arrived late at their mission. Then again, they are stupid enough to allow it to happen. "I'll wait 5 more minutes before I head out to find them." Nami then yelled, "Hey, let us down here. If you let me down, I will give you a lot of money." The man scoffed, "I don't need your money. You can keep it. Besides, after I hand your captain to the Marines, I'm gonna have a lot more money than your tiny little ape brain can dream of." The girl had several ticks mark form on her head. "Who are you calling an ape? You mongrel? When I leave here, I'm going to gut you alive. You hear me? I'm going to gut you." Zoro sighed, "Forget it, Nami. We'll just have to wait for the others to come and save us from this candle trap. Luffy's clearly out of commission, and the giants are no of use right now, so we have to wait for the others to come and free us." The girl sighed sadly before looking toward the jungle. She looked at something in the distance. On a tree, she saw Usopp climbing it with fear evident on his face. He looked as if he was watching a horror show. The girl cried, "My savior." Zoro nudged her, "Be quiet, or you might give the idiot out. Even if he was a distraction, it's better than nothing at the moment." From atop of a tree, Usopp stood up and yelled, "Listen here, Baroque works. I, the great Captain Usopp, came here to demand that you free my crewmates from your clutches. I will give you one chance to do that or I will destroy you quickly and powerfully." Mr. 3 looked at him as if the boy lost his marbles and said, "Oh, I see. You're a member of the Straw Hat Pirates. I think that you're way over your head." He then looked at the slingshot in Usopp's hand. "Please don't tell me that you're going to defeat me using that slingshot." Usopp smirked. "Well, I have to say that I'm quite pleased that you noticed your downfall with my magnificent weapon." The boy smiled as he loaded the slingshot and let out a pellet, special bullet. Mr. 3 made a wall of wax, smoke star. The entire place was covered in smoke as the man couldn't see anything, but Robin was still able to see, and so did Sanji. The blonde-haired quickly ran toward Mr. 3 and kicked him in the face, sending him flying from the smoke. The black-haired man stood up from the ground as he looked at the blonde in front of him and said, "You bastard, do you even know who am I?" Sanji was angry as this man tried to harm his Nami Swan. Sanji replied, "I'm the cook of the Straw Hat Pirates, and I'm going to sink you alive for trying to hurt Nami Swan." Mr. 3 stood up quickly and made a wall of wax, but Sanji kicked it, causing it to break to pieces. Sanji looked at Mr. 3, "I'm going to destroy you, you bastard. I'll make candles out of you for a romantic dinner for me and Nami Swan." The man jumped into the air and sailed toward Mr. 3. Meanwhile, Robin smiled as Sanji did his turn perfectly and distracted Mr. 3. She then crossed her arms and looked at Luffy. She formed two arms and quickly wiped the painted symbol on the boy, causing him to snap out of it. Ms. Goldenweek was calm this entire time since she was in no direct danger. She looked and was shocked to see the boy standing. He was no longer affected by her powers, causing her to frown a little. The girl stood up and said, "Colors of emotion. Rage." She then drew a red symbol on the ground as the boy said, "All right, now I can free the rest of the crew." The boy then launched a fist only for it to hit the ground. The boy was confused, but the small girl standing there with a blank face. He understood that she was the reason behind this, so he tried one more time but achieved the same result. Suddenly hands bloomed from his chest as they smudged the symbol on the ground. A mouth formed on his ear as he heard Robin's voice, "Luffy, go and free our friends. Vivi and I will handle the girl." The boy then yelled, "All right, I will leave this to you and Vivi." The boy then raced toward the giant tower of wax as Ms. Goldenweek tried to launch another attack toward her, but she jumped to the side as Vivi swung her weapon besides her. The girl looked at Vivi blankly. "Oh, it's you. I suppose that the one helping you is the other girl that the boss wants." She scratched her head. "How about that you give and I will not hurt?" Vivi then frowned as she said, "Believe this fight will end before you even think it will." The girl quirked an eyebrow. "You seem extremely confident in your abilities. How is that possible?" Vivi simply smiled at the little girl. Something which unnerved the girl. Vivi then whistled for something as the bushes began to shake. "I noticed from our few interactions that you are deathly afraid of something." From behind the bushes, Vivi's duck came and saluted her. He looked at the girl and quacked. This caused the small girl to quiver in fear. She really was afraid of ducks, or at least Vivi's duck for that. The girl went for her paints only for a phantom hand to appear and smack them away. The E-duck which slowly started to approach her, making her back away in fear. Robin then appeared from behind the bushes with her best, "I'm disappointed in you," face. She walked to Ms. Goldenweek and said, "I'm disappointed in you, young lady. You should be in school studying and having friends. What do you think you're doing all the way here hurting other people?" The girl, confused beyond belief, looked to the side and saw the duck beside her, causing her to pass out. Robin looked at the unconscious girl and put her hands on her hips. "I have to be honest, when you said that the girl was afraid of your duck, I thought that you were joking. I didn't know that you meant it for real." Vivi laughed a little. "I know. I wasn't sure either. It was a 50-50 gamble, but I'm glad that it worked out at the end of the day." She looked at the passed out agent and said, "Can you please restrain her so she won't cause any trouble if she woke up?" Robin then made a couple of phantom limbs that grabbed the girl's arms and tied them to her back. The black-haired girl smiled. "All right, now that this is over, Usopp, you can come out." The boy comes from behind the bushes, shivering in fear. "Is the girl down already? I need to begin working on my master plan to free everyone." The boy then brought out a small tank from his bag and a bunch of ropes. Vivi looked at him with worry. "Are you sure this is going to work out? I don't want them to be burnt or badly scarred for that matter." The boy nodded his head. "My plan is 100% safe proof. Once the fire loosens the wax, they will be able to jump from it to the ground and they won't be hurt. Plus, I'm sure that they have been through worse than what's going to happen, especially Zoro. The guy is like a walking tank," Usopp told her. The girl nodded her head. "Well, as long as it works and everyone is safe, I won't complain." Usopp then looked and his eyes bulged as he yelled, "What the hell is that idiot think he's doing?" The boy then stood up and bolted toward Luffy. The two girls looked in confusion as Robin proceeded to continue dunking the ropes inside the tank. They needed to free their friends so they can finish this thing. Back with Luffy, the boy looked at the giants and said, "Master Giants, I'm sorry, if he didn't manage to get. You wouldn't be trapped in here. Don't worry, I'm going to save you now." Broggy laughed a little. "Don't worry about us, tiny human. It will take more than a few candlesticks to take us. Warriors of Elbaf, down. We just need to can our breaths and then we'll bust out of this prison that he set for us." Dory also chuckled. "You're a really nice little human, but you need to worry about your friends too before they're turned into human statues." The boy looked up and saw that both Zoro and Nami were both stuck and were about to be trapped inside the wax, falling on them forever. The boy panicked. "I can't allow that to happen. I need to have more adventures with them." The boy looked at the tower and saw a huge stick that was supporting the rotating desk, which was causing the candle powder to fall on them, so he readied himself to destroy it. The boy used his powers to stretch his arms back and launch himself as Usopp yelled, "No, don't." Luffy looked at him with a confused expression. He was going to break the huge support so the plate thing would fall to the ground. So why was Usopp stopping him? Why do you want me to stop? I'm going to save them, so can you move? Usopp waved his arms. No, the thing you're going to do will put them in danger. The boy explained before putting a finger to his chest. Don't worry though, because I, the great Captain Usopp, have a plan to free our friends. Luffy looked at him before nodding. So what is my part of the plan? Usopp looked at him with a serious face and said, when the time comes, I want you to grab the idiot's head and use the flame on the top of it to light the ropes that I will hand to you up. Luffy nodded his head and asked, so what am I going to do now? Usopp tapped his chin and said, good question. I'm not really sure what you should do right now. Nami then yelled from the top, I don't give a damn what you want him to do right now. I want to be freed from here, and if it isn't in the next few minutes, you're both gonna get the death of your lives, you hear me? Usopp then smacked a fist into his hand and said, how about you go and help Sanji fight Mr. 3? I'm sure with both of you there, you'll be able to beat him in no time. Luffy nodded his head as he went to Sanji to aid him in the fight against Mr. 3, and Usopp looked up at his friends and said, don't worry, guys. I will help you in a bit. I just need to make sure that the rope is entirely soaked in fuel so it can melt the tower quickly when set it ablaze. Nami took 3 seconds to process this before yelling, set it ablaze? She then screamed at the retreating form of Usopp. What do you mean set it ablaze? I'm too young to die by burning. Zoro then said, can it, woman? He said that he has a way to free us, so we have to see what he is planning to do unless you want to become a statue for the rest of our lives, or in this case short lives. Nami cried, why didn't I stay home? I would be safe away from crazy organizations and deadly warlords of the sea. I guess that there is no turning back now, is there? Zoro looked at her and said in all seriousness, you signed your death warrant the moment you accepted to be on Rubberhead's crew. The girl then said, you know that you don't serious when you're posing like an idiot. The man didn't say anything, but he kept his pose. The girl shook her head, as she saw Usopp talking with Robin and Vivi on one side and Luffy joining the fight against Mr. 3 on the other. This is going to be an extremely long day. With Luffy, the boy looked at Mr. 3 and said, hey Candlehead, did you miss me? The man looked at him with shock evident on his face, you're free? Luffy then sent his fist back stretching it, as a bird. The fist came back as the boy yelled, gum gum pistol. The fist was countered by a wall of candle which blocked it. But Mr. 3 let his guard down which allowed Sanji to land a strike on him, Collier strike. The man was kicked so hard that the air was knocked out of him as he was sent sprawling to the ground. The man then stood up as he saw Luffy and Sanji standing right in front of him. Sanji said, nice of you to drop by, shitty captain. I hope we didn't mess up your tea party. Luffy replied, hey, that girl's powers were really weird. It was like I was outside my body when she painted that symbol on me. It wasn't like I was doing it on purpose. Sanji rolled his eyes. Now, let's kick Candleman's butt. Sanji nodded his head as he lifted his leg and readied himself. Luffy then jumped high in the air as he stretched his arms backward, gum gum. He then sent them forward toward Mr. 3-3 who jumped away, bazooka. This caused a huge puff of dust which the criminal planned to use, but his plans failed. Sanji quickly came at him and kicked him in the face sending him to the ground with a harsh thud. Mr. 3 quickly stood up and formed a wax seal that trapped Sanji's leg, but the man looked at him as if he was crazy. Sanji merely lifted his leg and smashed it on the ground causing the seal to shatter. Mr. 3 then felt something connect with his back as Luffy yelled, gum gum whip. The boy was so much into the fight that he forgot to warn Sanji causing the other man to be caught in the attack. Sanji then stood up and walked to Luffy, you moron, you got me too. Be careful where you aim your attacks next time in the future. Luffy merely scratched his chin and said, sorry, Sanji. If it helps, I didn't mean to hurt you. I only meant to kick the Candleman's butt. Sanji merely bit a reply back before grabbing Luffy and jumping to the side avoiding a sea of wax. The man lifted an eyebrow. Well, who knew? You can really take a huge amount of punishment. Mr. 3 replied, never underestimate the abilities of a criminal mastermind. I will defeat you, Baroque works secrets safe. The man then sent another tidal wave of wax toward the two. But Sanji jumped into the air avoiding it and Luffy hung onto a tree. The man then said, watch me as I defeat you both. He then made some kind of armor on his body made from wax as he said, look at my amazing masterpiece. The man then yelled, Ms. Goldenweek, please paint it for me. When he didn't hear a reply, he looked only to see the girl passed out with his other targets there, so the man said, I guess that I have to beat you then. Luffy readied himself, you can try, Candleman. Back with Usopp, the boy looked at the rope and checked it. He nodded his head, Operation Free our crewmates. The second phase begins now. He then jumped on the duck and said, onward my noble steed. The duck then ran toward the huge structure as Usopp readied the ropes to use them. The duck then ran all over the structure once it reached it with Usopp tying the soaked room on everything he can reach. Once the duck was finished with the structure, it went to the giants where Usopp did the same thing and tied the giants with the ropes. Bragi asked in confusion, "What are you planning to do, little human?" He knew the boy had a plan to free them, but didn't quite understand how the ropes will help them. Usopp smiled and said, "Don't fear, honorable warrior, for your freedom will be guaranteed in a few moments." He then made Karoo go to Luffy and Sanji to set the final part of his action in motion. The boy ran toward them and yelled, "Luffy, grab his head for me, will you?" The boy then lifted a part of the rope and Luffy understood what he had to do. Luffy then jumped high and landed on the shoulder of Mr. Three's armor. The boy said, "Thank you for the assist, Candleman." The boy then grabbed his head and pulled it down where the flame on the top of his hair was near the ground as the man struggled. Usopp smiled as he jumped off Karoo and quickly ran toward the two to finish everything off and free their friends from their prison. He only needed a small spark to ignite the fire. Sanji, to hold Mr. Three, still kicked him in the back of his armor, causing him to fall on the ground as Usopp came near him and put the rope near the flame. The small flame then caused a line of fire to go toward the giant structure, and soon enough a massive flame erupted all over the structure. Usopp patted himself on the back, but one person seemed a little bit opposed to what happened. Sanji went and kicked Usopp. "You idiot, you killed Nami Swan." The long-nosed boy rubbed the back of his head in pain. "No, you moron. I saved her from being turned into a human statue. She should be free any moment now." Luffy then said, "Good and all, but I still needed to kick Mr. Three's butt, so goodbye." The boy then went to the downed man who lifted his head. Mr. Three then saw all his hard work go to waste. "What happened to magnificent work? You, people, shouldn't have been able to find a way to defeat me. It's impossible." Luffy appeared in front of him smiling. "Nothing is impossible, Candleman." Luffy then delivered a hard haymaker to the man's face, sending him up straight. He followed that with a strong kick to the man's armor, which cracked a little. Luffy smiled. "Looks like your strong armor isn't so strong after all." The boy then kicked him hard in the face. Mr. Three yelled, "I won't be taken down by a brat." Luffy laughed a little. "It's too late. You are already defeated." The boy stretched his arms backward and yelled, "Gum gum." The arms came back and impacted with Mr. Three's armor, bazooka. Upon contact, the wax armor shattered into tiny pieces, sending Mr. Three sprawling to the ground near the forest. The man looked at Luffy with sweat flying down his forehead as he quickly turned and made a run for it inside the thick jungles, with Luffy yelling, "Oh, no you don't." Back with Usopp, he was looking at the massive inferno as two figures jumped from it. Zoro and Nami were now freed from their waxy prison. Usopp then looked toward the giants as slowly from where they were trapped two huge beings stood up laughing. Dory looked at Usopp. "That was a god plan to help us, tiny humans. I have to admit, I didn't expect any one of you to have the guts to set everything on flames." Bragi also laughed. "Yeah, this tiny human saved us, the warriors of a lab. He must have a strong spirit to do that." The boy was smiling happily as he was acknowledged by the giants, but he suddenly felt a very malicious aura behind him. The boy turned his back and saw Nami holding a part of her shirt. "This was one of my favorite shirts and now it has burn marks on it. Expect the fee for this will be added to your bill." The boy gulped, since the girl already had most of the crime and debt except Zoro, who said he doesn't do deals with witches. The boy sighed in defeat. "Well, as long as you're good, it doesn't matter. I mean, what is the worst that you can put on there? I mean, I already have 100% interest." The girl smiled as if he was challenging her. "Really, now?" She walked up to him and whispered in his ear, "How does 1000% interest sound to you? Is it bad enough?" The boy fell over. "That's robbery. You can't do that to me. I won't be able to pay even if I lived 1,000 generations." The girl shrugged, telling him to figure it out since it wasn't any of her problems. The boy slumped to the ground as Robin and Bibi approached them. "So I see that everyone is free now," Robin said. Usopp nodded his head. The black-haired girl then looked around and didn't see Luffy. "Where's Luffy?" Sanji pointed to the forest and said, "He went off to finish that Candleman. He should be back in a few minutes." The man then took a puff from his cigarette. Robin walked toward the jungle and said, "I hope he doesn't get trapped since that little girl managed to escape from us when we gave her our backs." Bragi said, "Don't worry. We'll help if needed." Robin smiled as she looked at the forest. It wasn't like Luffy was going to be defeated, but she couldn't help but be worried for him. In the forest, Luffy was running and yelling, "You can't just run from me forever, you know. Just give up and I promise that I will keep the beating to a minimum." The boy then entered a clearing and saw many clones of Mr. Three standing there. The man quickly began to monologue. "Tell me, Straw Hat, what are you going to do now? How are you planning to defeat me?" The boy didn't say anything. He only looked around him, trying to find the source of the sound. The man carried on, "While you go and look for each one of those clones to see if they were the real me, I'll be able to trap and defeat you. I suggest that you." The man was silenced when Luffy kicked him in the face, cutting him off. The boy looked where the man was standing and said, "You should have kept quiet. You would have had a better chance of beating me, not that it mattered anyway at the end of the line." The man asked as he passed out, How did you manage to find me so quickly? The man then fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Luffy looked at him and said, I have very super instincts and you weren't quiet. I just had to pinpoint the location of the sound. The boy looked to the side and asked, now, what to do with you? He stretched his arms and caught Miss Goldenweek, who was shivering. The girl then said, please, I swear that I won't harm anyone anymore, just let me go. The boy looked her in the eyes and said, fine, but don't harm my friends, okay? The girl nodded her head as she ran quickly away from Luffy, who took out her partner like he was nothing. The boy then walked back to the rest of the crew. It took him a little bit of navigation, but he managed to reach them. He looked at them and said, well, I managed to beat that Candleman. Vivi smiled, well, since that is over, this means that we can move on with our travels. Nami interrupted her, Vivi, we can't. We need some kind of way to leave the island and go to a new one, since apparently, the log pose needs a year to lock onto a place. The blue-haired girl smiled, not a pea. Sanji pulled out something, Tada, a permanent log pose to my country. Nami smiled as she felt relief flood through her body, does that means? Vivi nodded her head, we can load up and quickly leave the island. The girl was shocked when Nami turned to the crew and yelled, alright now, move quickly. We need to finish this and go on moving. Everyone nodded and they entered the forest and went to the ship. The giants excused themselves, saying that they needed to ready themselves for something. During the walk, Robin slapped Nami back and yelped, ouch. Nami asked her, why did you slap my back? The girl looked at her hand and saw that it was red from where she was bitten. Well, I saw this bug on your back, so I slapped it away. I didn't think it had such a strong bite. The girl began to rub the area as Nami took a look at it. The girl cringed a little, it seems that the area is inflated a little bit. I think we have a couple of disinfectants on the ship, so I'll apply some, and let's hope for the best. Robin nodded her head, but she still scratched the area where the bite was, since it was making her feel a bit uncomfortable. Truly, this was a rare case where kindness came back and bit her where it truly hurts. She can only hope this isn't serious. The girls made it to the ship, but they noticed that Zoro and Sanji were arguing with each other. The two were arguing with each other about whose kill was the largest. It was amusing to say, but the girls had much more important things to attend to. Sanji yelled at Zoro, no, my kill is the bigger one. Look at it. It's longer and bigger than yours, so that means I win this competition. The man said, pointing at his T-Rex. Zoro shook his head, but yours is much thinner than mine, so that means I win this. Just deal with, swirly brow. Zoro then put one foot on his triceratops while smirking. The two then continued their back and forth till Nami threw a plank at them. Zoro looked at her pissed while Sanji looked like he was hit by an angel. The girl yelled, I don't care whose kill is bigger than who. Just cut up one of them and let's get moving. She then looked at Zoro and said, cut up yours and load it up. This made the man smirk while Sanji fell to the ground, despair evident on his face. The green-haired man did what she told him to happily. In fact, he did a little bit too happy as he smiled at his crewmate's anguish, making the girl roll her eyes. Robin then came and said, are they at it again? They seem quite lively. He makes me smile sometimes. Plus, it's good entertainment if you ask me. Nami looked at her and said, no, it isn't. Those two are always getting on my nerves with their constant yelling. I just hope that they grow out of it someday. Robin smiled, well, I believe they do that as a form of stress relief. It's tiring being on the sea 24/7 for days, so it's their own way of blowing steam. The orange-haired girl rubbed her shoulder, well, when you put it that way, I guess it makes sense. Robin walked to the cabin and walked inside, I'm going to make a sandwich, do you want something? Nami shook her head as she saw the girl enter the room, and the guys load in the meat. She then went around the ship and saw Usopp. The girl then asked him, are we ready to sail yet? The boy nodded his head and said, yeah, Going Merry is operational. The ship then began to sail toward the exit of the island. The two then noticed the two giants standing on the edge of the island. This made Nami feel a bit uncomfortable, so she said, hey there guys, is there something wrong? The giants just stood there. Their weapons were raised high into the sky and they looked into the distance, making the girl wonder what were they looking at or what were they waiting for. Bragi then said, my friends, when the time comes keep sailing forward. Don't be afraid, we will help you exit this island safely. This made sweat begin to gather on the orange-haired girl's forehead, wondering what type of monstrosity was waiting for them. Dory then added, you have helped us a lot today little humans, so allow us to return the favor to you. Nami at this point gulped a little and was about to ask the course be changed, but Usopp grabbed her shoulder and shook his head. The girl hesitantly nodded and said, well, you heard them, keep moving forward. The crew then moved around the ship making sure it kept moving straight. The ship was now slowly making its way toward the opening of the island when the water began to move. Nami gulped, what in the world is lurking in these waters? She looked at Usopp who was shivering but steeled himself. She really regretted not taking another exit. Suddenly from the water, a huge goldfish jumped out from it and went toward the ship to swallow it whole, causing Nami to yell, everyone, change course. Quickly change course. Usopp then yelled, "No, don't. The giants told us that they were going to help us, so we have to trust them." The others were conflicted as they didn't know what to do. They didn't have a lot of time to think about what to do as the huge fish was upon them, causing Nami to yell at Usopp, "You idiot, we're about to die because of you." On the shoreline, the giants looked at the huge fish and Dory said, "Because of this monster, our friends might not be able to continue their journey. We can't allow that, can we, Bragi?" The other giant laughed, "No, we can't, so let's help them escape this beast." Both giants then raised their weapons and said, "Kingdom." They then swung their weapons downward toward the huge fish, sovereignty. The ship was now in front of the fish mouth. The huge beast opened its mouth and took them in, but before it can swallow them, a huge pressure came from the outside, cutting a hole inside the monster and allowing safe passage for the crew. Usopp looked back at the giants and yelled, "I promise you both that I will become a brave warrior of the sea and I will visit Elbaf one day." The boy had tears in his eyes as the ship sailed away from the island, but he then looked at Nami, who was pissed off beyond belief, and said meekly, "I'm sorry." A couple of miles away from the little garden, a marine ship was bobbing in the water. On its deck was Tashigi, who was looking at a new sword in her collection. The woman was still strong in her dream of collecting all known swords from all pirates and bounty hunters to perverse them. The woman was fanning over her latest achievement when she heard her captain calling out for her, "Tashigi, you sword freak. Come here, this instant, or else I'm cutting your salary." The woman quickly ran to her captain and asked, "Sir, I'm here, how can I be of assistance?" The man then pointed toward Den Den Mushi and said, "We managed to intercept this call a while back from an island nearby. Take a look." The woman then sat near the transponder snail as it recited the call, or at least bits of it. "Sir, Mr. Zero, Princess Vivi, the Straw Hats, eliminated, the black-haired girl, captured." The woman then stopped a little and said, "Vivi? Isn't that the name of the Princess of Alabasta?" Smoker nodded his head. The man stood up and said, "Whatever the princess has to do with the Straw Hats, I don't know, but I know where to get some of my answers." The man then walked over to a man with the number 11 imprinted on his cheeks and said, "So pretty boy, mind telling how you work for, or do we have to do this the hard way?" The man looked at him, "You won't anything out of me, so don't bother. I was sworn to secrecy, so I won't say anything to anyone. Do your best." Smoker then said, "Well, we don't need anything. All I need is to confirm some information I took from the letter in your pocket. Nothing else, so make it easier on yourself." The man panicked as he said, "Letter? What letter? No way. If the boss knows that I revealed that I worked for Baroque Works to the Marines, he'll have my head hung on the kingdom's gates back in the capital." Smoker then said, "Thank you for the information. That's all I need." He then stood away from the man, who realized that he was tricked and began to yell at Smoker, telling him to come back here. The man then walked up to Tashigi and said, "Tell everyone to set sail to Alabasta this moment." The girl nodded her head and went to give the orders. When she was done, she asked him, "Do you really think that Straw Hat and his crew were taken out?" The man looked at her, taking a puff from his cigars. "Knowing him and his track record, I believe it's highly unlikely, so that's why I'm going to Alabasta to determine that myself, because if someone took out Straw Hat, that means we're in front of bigger danger." The girl looked forward and frowned. She knew that if Luffy was there, then so was Rorona Zoro. She has to fight him and reclaim her honor as a swordswoman. She also really wanted to take those swords away from him. He didn't deserve them. An absolute emergency. It was only a couple of hours since the Strowit's departure from Little Garden. The crew were now sitting on the ship as they were doing their own thing. Nami was watching the ship's direction to make sure that they were sailing in the right direction. Usopp was tinkering with some devices. Sanji was protecting the kitchen from Luffy as he prepared a meal for him, and finally, Robin and Vivi were sitting with each other on the deck, each reading a book. Vivi glanced at Robin from her book. She was astounded by how many books the girl read since they left Little Garden. She had at least 9 books in front of her and was currently reading the 9th one. It was unbelievable, but then again, she was able to know who the princess really was just from looking at her face. Vivi then had an idea pop inside her head. She put her book down and talked to Robin. "Robin, I was meaning to ask you, if it doesn't bother you, how did you and Luffy meet?" The black-haired girl smiled a little, looking at Vivi, who then said, "I mean, you're so different from each other. I find it hard to believe that you both happened to stumble on each other on a beach walk in the afternoon." The woman replied, "I'm not bothered at all, Vivi. In fact, the entire village was quite shocked when Luffy and I began dating, but they do say opposites attract each other." Vivi began to press her fingers against each other. "So, about that story?" Robin claps her hands and smiles, but winces a little and scratches her hand. "I will begin, and believe it amazing. It's like one of those stories when the princess finds her knight in shining armor." Vivi's eyes began to sparkle in anticipation. "That sounds so amazing." Robin giggles a little and coughs in her fist. "Well, you see, in my home island of Ohara, I wasn't the most loved individual. Children used to pick at me and their parents would usually scold me when I defended myself, and it didn't help that I eat a devil fruit at a very young age and always read books. This sorta made me an outcast in the entire island." Vivi gasped, putting her hand to her mouth. That's horrible. How can they do that to a child? Robin shrugged. My mom went on an expedition to search for the poneglyphs and left me at my uncle's home, but his wife was extremely cruel towards me. Robin had a sour face when she said that, so I guess the other islanders took this as a sign to do whatever they wanted with me. Vivi pouted, crossing her arms. Well, it's still wrong to pick on a defenseless little child. Robin smiled, carrying on. But on the island, there were also nice people who helped me. There were the scholars of Ohara, and their head Professor Clover was like a father to me, and he taught me everything to know about archaeology, and with his help, I became an archaeologist at the 8. Vivi was astounded by how Robin was able to achieve such a high rank at such a young age. The girl clapped her hands. That's so amazing, Robin. I bet you were very happy that you managed to do that. I heard that the exams in Ohara were extremely hard. Robin nodded her head. That's true, but back to our story. The woman then looked at her book. But one day, during the regular cycle of annoyance, something odd happened. A boy who I never saw before came out from the bushes and began to defend me. I was shocked to the point where I thought that it was just a cruel prank, but then he showed his devil fruit. Vivi's eyes had stars as she cooed. That's so cool, it's like love at first sight. Robin giggled a little. Well, you can say that. For me, it might have been like that. When the other kids left, he began to talk to me. I felt very happy back then, and then he said he was hungry against all odds, so I took him home. She frowned a little before smiling again. I managed then to sneak him in because if my uncle's wife knew that I fed him, she would have hid me for sure. We talked and I discovered that he came all the way from the East Blue to the West Blue. I was floored, to say the least. Vivi nodded her head as the black-haired girl continued her story. He then told me about how his grandpa was planning to send him to prison if he didn't join the Marines, and how he trained him with his brother Ace. He then told me that his brother was looking for him, so I was kinda bummed out thinking that he will leave me, but he asked me to play with him, so I couldn't have said no. The next day, while we were playing, we found a huge giant on the shores of my island. He told us that his name is Saul, and we befriended him quickly. That was only the beginning of the incoming storm that might have ruined everything, Robin said, shivering a little. The blue-haired girl gulped, knowing that the bad part was about to come to light. We spent a couple of days together playing with Saul, but one day, the scholars cornered me and asked me why I was spending more time outside the Tree of Knowledge. I tried to dodge, but in the end, I told them about Luffy, so they asked to meet him. The meeting went well till his grandfather showed up, and I was shocked when I knew who he was. Vivi asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Who was his grandpa? The hero of the Marines. Monkey D. Garp. Vivi was shocked beyond belief. The grandson of the hero of the Marines wanted to be a pirate. Talk about family issues. The man came to my island with another group from the world government to investigate if the scholars were researching the poneglyphs, and the group from the world government had the authority to start a buster call to wipe out the island from the face of existence. Robin said, shocking Vivi to the core. She knew what the buster call was, but she thought it was only a myth. Robin carried on. Turned out, Garp was looking for Saul since he ditched the Marines and helped free my mother, who was arrested during her voyage. And at the same time, the others arrived at Ohara. My mom also arrived. Robin then leaned back into her chair, wiping some sweat from her brow. Garp and Professor Clover then decided to talk to Saul after we went and talked with him, and he asked us to talk to Luffy's grandpa to come to him. We stayed a little inside the library, but Luffy was bored quickly, so he left the tree through means I hope to never relive, or at least at that age. Robin carried on. We went into the forest to play, but we then encountered the world government men, and we heard how they were planning to blow up the island. Luffy and myself, after some hesitation on my part, managed to snatch the buster call trigger, and after a long chase delivered it to Luffy's grandpa. After that, I met my mom and we reunited. And finally, Garp and Professor Clover managed to make a deal with the world government to save the island and everyone else, while also giving my mom a chance to raise me on Luffy's home island. Vivi had tears in her eyes. That was so romantic. So were you two childhood lovers? Robin laughed. Oh no, we weren't. It took Luffy about 9 years to understand his feelings toward me. His devil fruit really causes him to have a hard time processing things. Vivi fell out of her chair. She then stood up again. That was way less romantic than I thought it would be, but romantic nonetheless. Luffy then came and hugged Robin from behind and rubbed his face against hers. The boy then pecked her on the cheek, making her blush a little. He looked at Vivi. Oh hi, Vivi. What were guys talking about? Vivi then said, oh nothing. Robin was telling me how you two met each other. I thought it was really cool. It sounded really romantic. Luffy laughed and said, did she tell you how my brother Ace was jealous of her when they first met? He thought that she was planning to make into a Marine. Robin herself laughed a little, saying, I still don't get where he had that idea come into his head. Luffy shrugged. He then said, Grandpa was really imaginative in his ways to make us into Marines. Something like this wasn't below him. Robin nodded her head as Vivi said, are you really Garp's grandson? Louis, yes, and I'm going to be the next king of pirates. I'm going to find the One Piece. Shi. Robin then laughed her own trademark laugh, der shi. The two lovers continued like this, shocking Vivi at how the two were in sync. Perhaps, they were more alike than she initially thought. Robin then stood up and walked to her room as she said, "I feel a little bit tired, so I'm going to sleep a little. If you want anything from me, call out for me." Luffy then noticed her scratching her hand and said, "Is there something wrong with your hand?" The girl looked at him and waved him off. "It's just a small mosquito bite from Little Garden. I'm sure that it will pass over in a few days." The girl unconsciously began to scratch where she was bitten. The boy bit his lip and said, "Are you sure?" He walked up to her and said, "Let me see it for a bit." The girl showed him her hand. The boy looked at it, causing him to frown. In her palm, there was a huge inflation accompanied by a deformation in the skin and a purple color where she was bitten. The boy frowned. "I don't know about this. It seems really serious. Are you sure that you're okay?" He then put a hand to her head and noticed that she was heating up. "Also, you seem to have a fever. I think you might be coming down with something." The girl shook her head, gently kissing her lover. "I'm alright, gummy bear. I promise you that I am extremely fine. Maybe, I just need to rest my body a little bit." The boy hummed disapprovingly but nodded his head nonetheless. He allowed the girl to enter the room and rest for a bit but planned to check on her in a small while to make sure that she isn't sick or had some kind of disease. That would be a problem since they had no professional doctor on board. Vivi looked at Luffy and said, "Are you sure allowing her to go without further inspection is okay?" Luffy shook his head. "I'll check on her later. She's really stubborn when she feels like it, especially when it comes to helping others. One time, Miss Olivia had to tie her down in her bed when she was extremely sick when she insisted to teach me." Vivi nodded her head. "Right. Robin told me about that. She lived most of her life on your island." Luffy chuckled. "Yes, we had the best time of our lives. We used to hunt in the forest together with all types of animals. Huge tigers, huge bears, huge crocodiles, and huge boars." The boy hummed hungrily, rubbing his stomach. "Tiger soup." He then jumped down and ran to Sanji. "Hey, Sanji." The man looked at him and asked, "Can you make tiger soup for me?" The blonde looked at him with an unimpressed look. "It's always something with you." The man took a puff from his cigarette and answered, "Forget it, rubberhead. We don't have tiger meat. We only have dinosaur meat. In other words, you'll get what you have." The boy frowned but then nodded his head. He walked away, dragging his arms on the ground and entering the kitchen. The blonde man looked at him and shook his head. "Medical condition or not, you can't be a bottomless hole. You'll kill us eventually." The man then saw Vivi and began to swoon at her. "Vivi-chan, I hope you're enjoying your stay on the ship. I hope that you ask me for anything that you need." The girl smiled at him. She looked to the side and saw Zoro training as he saw a metal pole weighted by several weights. The girl then sat on the chair as Nami approached her. The girl sat beside her and said, "So how are you adjusting to the ship?" Vivi smiled a little. "It is sure a little bit new, but I am still thankful for all of your help to take me back to my country. Most people must have demanded some ridiculous amount of money." Nami smiled and nodded her head. She chose not to tell her that she was planning to sue her for about 10 billion berries once everything was said and done. "We just like to help people. It makes me feel bad if I charged someone with money." Vivi smiled as Zoro coughed from the side. The man looked at Nami and said, "Woman, your mouth says something, but your eyes say the opposite. I'm sure you're going to milk her country like a cow once everything is said and done." Vivi looked at Nami, whose eyebrows were twitching in annoyance. The woman calmly walked up to Zoro. The next thing Vivi knew was the sound of Nami's fists hitting Zoro's skull. The girl looked at the man who was sprawled on the ground with multiple bumps over his head. Nami then looked at Vivi, causing the girl to shiver. The girl then waved her smoking hand. "Don't listen to that bozo. I would never do something like that." Vivi nodded her head, not wanting to face a similar fate. Nami then noticed Robin's books still on the table. She frowned. "That's odd. Robin usually cleans after herself. I just hope that she isn't being influenced by Luffy." Vivi then said, "Well, she looked a little bit tired when she was reading. She went to her room to rest for a little bit." Nami frowned as she held the books and went to put them in the bookcase. She was also going to check up on Robin to make sure that she was fine. A couple of moments passed till Nami's voice echoed throughout the ship. "Everyone quickly come here." The rest of the crew dropped everything that they were doing and bolted to the captain's room as Sanji yelled, "What's happening, Nami Swan? Your Princess Charming is." He was silenced by a fist to the face courtesy of Nami. Nami then said, "There is something wrong with Robin. She boiling." Everyone looked at the black-haired girl and she looked miserable. The girl's face was red. She was sweating profusely. She seemed to be in absolute agony. The girl opened her eyes and said, "I'm fine. There's no need to worry." Luffy quickly sat by her side and helped her up. The boy hugged her. "Don't lie. You look horrible." He then fluffed her pillow and helped her lay down. He looked at Sanji and said, "Sanji, can you make soup for her?" The man saluted his captain and said, "I'll use the best ingredients that the ship has to offer." Usopp looked at him. "Wait, what type of ingredients were you putting in our food?" Sanji shrugged. "I usually fed you apes leftovers and spoiled or rotten food. I keep the fresh ones for the ladies of the ship. They deserve it more than you idiots. Usopp looked at him and said, "That's an unbelievably cold man. Seriously, that's cold even for you." Sanji shrugged, leaving the room to go to the kitchen as Vivi asked, "Who's the one that has medical knowledge?" Everyone then pointed at Robin, given that she had the most knowledge. The girl sighed as she put her hand on Robin's forehead and shook it due to how hot it was. Vivi sighed, "Looks like we had to double our speed to reach Alabasta to heal Robin." Nami stood near Robin and put a wet towel on the girl's head. "I'm not so sure about this. We might have to make a stop on some island to heal her. She isn't in a state to wait for a couple of days. She's in a bad condition." Robin coughed out, "No, I'm not a priority now. We need to reach Vivi's country. The situation is much worse than we expected." The girl pointed to a table in her room, and Vivi walked to it and opened a drawer on the table. In the drawer, there was a newspaper. The girl read it and gasped, "It's an article about my country." The girl dropped to the ground as Sanji entered the room with a bowl of soup. The girl didn't want to believe it, but the situation is much worse than expected. Half of the royal army has defected and joined the rebels. This is so bad. I really need to reach Alabasta as fast as possible. Sanji replied, "And we'll do that as soon as we heal Robin Schwan. We can't just keep her suffering." The girl bit her lip as she thought about her opinions. Nami then said, "Look, you think about it. I need to make sure that we're still on course." The girl looked at Robin, who was being spoon-fed by Luffy. The black-haired girl looked at her and smiled, "Don't worry about me. Our main goal is to reach Alabasta. Once we're there, you'll heal me." Vivi then walked outside and saw Nami yelling out orders. Nami then said, pointed towards Zoro, "That idiot was driving us into a storm that was going to kill us." The girl looked at Zoro, who rolled his eyes, angering her even further. The man retorted, "I was going to where the big clouds were. That's usually a good sign." He was punched by Nami, who yelled, "Wait a couple of minutes and see what was going to happen if I didn't adjust the course." Truly, a couple of minutes later, in the direction that the ship was sailing in, a huge storm erupted that could have killed everyone. Vivi looked at Nami in awe at how she predicted what was going to happen. Zoro looked at the storm and said, "We should have just roughed it. I'm sure we would have been fine." This caused Nami to punch him hard on the head. The orange-haired girl yelled, "Don't speak crazy nonsense. We could have died, you dimwit." The green-haired man grumbled as he walked away from her to do more training. Vivi then let out a sigh of relief. She then sat down and began to think about her choices. She then reached a decision. "Guys, I've reached a decision. We need to head to my country as fast as possible, but that's why we need to find an island where we can treat Robin first." The rubber captain smiled at her. "Don't worry, Vivi. I'm sure we're able to find an island with a suitable doctor, but we still need to be quick." And with that, the crew began sailing to the nearest island that they can find to heal their crewmate. It was going to be risky, but it was worth it. A day had passed since Vivi's decision, and currently, Luffy and Usopp were on watch duty. They didn't have an idea where they were going, but Nami told them that she thinks that they were coming near an island. The girl was currently watching over Robin. The boys looked at each other as Luffy said, "It's a slow day, isn't it?" Usopp nodded his head in agreement, but suddenly a voice said, "It's also very cold today, isn't it?" Both boys' eyes then snapped to a person, wearing a clown's outfit with a sad expression on his face, who was standing on the water. The boys looked at each other and then at the man, who repeated himself, "Today is really cold." Usopp then rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, I guess it's a little cold. I think I need a sweater." Luffy agreed, nodding his head. "Yeah, I think so, but I'm not really feeling it," till he mentioned it. Zoro then came to the two and said, "What are you bozos talking about?" He then looked at the man on the water. "And what the heck are you doing here?" The man then readied his blade. The man looked at Zoro. "I was just saying that the weather was cold." Zoro blinked as if a realization hit him. "I guess that the weather is a little bit cold." Suddenly the sea began to jerk violently. A huge ship then emerged from the sea, going merry, back a little bit. The ship opened its doors as tens of soldiers stormed the smaller sea vessel. The commotion caused Sanji to come out running from Robin's room and ask in worry, "What the heck is going on here?" "What?" The man then put a cigarette in his mouth. "So I suppose that we are being boarded by an unwanted guest." He ignored the guns pointed at his head at the current moment. Zoro looked at him. "Yeah, it appears so. I don't think that they're the welcoming committee." Suddenly all men in front of the ship made a way for someone from the much larger ship to walk on. After that, 3 figures arrived on the ship. One of the 3 was the jester that they saw earlier. Another was a man who had afros on his body as well as a large mustache and was also wearing an orange suit. The 2 men then said, "Make way to the mighty King Wapol, the king of the Drum Kingdom." The last man was a very heavy man who rode on a woolly hippo. The man had purple hair and wore a crown with hippo skin on his top. He was wearing all over his body and was holding a knife. The most shocking thing that happened is when he bit the knife and began to eat it. The sight alone made Usopp's skin begin to crawl. It was rather worrisome and he can already feel trouble coming toward him from miles away. The man then said, "Hey there, it's like those 2 said. I'm King Wapol of the Drum Kingdom. so you should know who peasants are talking to before you address. Luffy then shut him off by yelling, "Hey dumbbell, what are you doing on my ship? Get off it, or else." The boy was silenced as a soldier hit him with the butt of his gun, telling him to know who he was talking to. Wapol shook his head. "Alright now, stay calm. There's no need for that. We're all friends here. I just need to ask you a couple of questions before I decide what to do with you." Luffy clenched his fists but kept himself calm because he didn't want to cause anything to harm Robin. The boy then yelled, "Then out with it, I don't have all day, you know." The man then waved his hands. "Oh, we don't have time, do we? Not a problem. I just need to ask if any of you knows where Drum Kingdom is, or if you have some kind of log pose that points toward it. If you have, I'll be on my way, and I'll leave you, folks, alone." Luffy then yelled, "No, we don't. Now get off my ship." The boy was getting agitated by the second. The man replied, "Hey there, no need for trouble. If you don't have a permanent log pose, then I guess I would have to stall down by taking all of your treasures on the ship." The moment he said treasures, an orange-haired missile exited the captain's room, whacking down a couple of soldiers along her way as she said in fury, "What are you saying? You want to take my money? I will kill you before anyone can even touch it." The jester then yelled, "Shut up, you foolish girl. You're talking to mighty King Wapol. You would be lucky if this doesn't end up costing you your head." The girl then said, "Get off this ship before I sick the boys on you. No one touches my money and lives to tell the tale." Wapol then laughed, "I like her. I want her boys. She's feisty." The man then went to apprehend Nami as the crew tensed. "As I was saying earlier, I will take this ship." The man then opened his jaw and bit a huge portion of the ship, causing Usopp to yell, "How in the world is he doing that?" The man replied through bites, "I ate the munch fruit. I can eat anything." The man then swallowed the piece he bit off and said, "Alright, let's end this, boys. Bring the girl and every valuable thing you can find on this ship." The man who went toward Nami was suddenly knocked out as Sanji stood in front of her. The man then said in a dangerous voice, "I will not allow you to touch Nami's swan, you ugly fat oaf." Sanji then kicked 3 soldiers down. Before the others can do anything, Zoro unsheathed his sword and cut down 5 of them, while Luffy punched most of them off the board. They then noticed that Wapol was still eating parts of the ships, causing Usopp to yell, "Someone, please stop him before he can keep hurting Mary." Luffy then ran forward, pulling back his arms, as Wapol swallowed another piece of Mary. The man then opened his mouth and bit down on Luffy and began to chew on the boy. The crew was panicking, but then Luffy's hand came back, slamming into the man's stomach. The hit was so strong that it caused the man to be lifted into the air and spit out Luffy. The man was then sent flying into the distance. Everyone from the Wapol's gang was shocked as the Afro man yelled, "King Wapol can't swim." He then pointed into the distance, saying, "Quickly, we must go and rescue him before he drowns." The jester looked at the crew. "I promise that you'll all will pay for this. You hear me? You will pay for this." They quickly collected their fallen men and sailed after their captain. The crew looked at them as Luffy yelled, "Quickly, everyone, let's keep sailing on. I'm sure that we're close to an island." Nami nodded her head and began to direct them. It took another 2 days to finally reach an island, and the island seemed to be a snowy one given the white tops of the mountains it had. The mountains were tall and straight that can't be climbed by regular means. Luffy yelled they can find a doctor on the ground, not the mountain, but if need maybe he was willing to climb it. Nami yelled, "We're nearing the island. Everyone, prepare to dock the ship." Usopp looked around and whistled, "Man, this island is really beautiful. I mean, just look at the snow. I can keep making snowmen for weeks on end." Nami then punched him, "We're not here for fun. We came here to find a doctor for Robin. Her situation is becoming much worse by the second. I hope we can treat her on time." The long-nosed boy asked meekly, "Do you think that she's going to die?" The boy was silenced by a punch for the girl for his stupid question. She didn't want to hear this type of question, especially if it involved her best friend on board of this sad ship. Robin was the only thing keeping her sane. The girl replied, "No, she won't die. And never say it so casually as if you're talking about the weather." The boy shivered as the girl added, "You should be happy that Luffy didn't hear you." The boy nodded again, knowing what Luffy would have done to him if he heard him saying that Robin would die, not that Usopp would blame him. He knew how to see your loved one sick. The boy looked, then saw some place that is good enough for them to set their anchor in, and asked Nami, "Hey, Nami. Do you think we can set our anchor here? I think it's good enough for us." The orange-haired girl nodded her head as she said, "Alright guys, let's put the anchor here." The girl was cut off when a bullet was shot into the air, causing her to back away. The girl looked up at the side of the small river that they entered and saw people with all types of weapons standing there glaring at them. One person holding a smoking rifle as he said, "Leave this island and never come back, pirates, or you'll face our wrath. We won't allow you to harm anyone again." Nami gulped as she silently cursed whoever attacked this island and lifted her hands in a sign of surrender and tried to talk to the people. "Look, we don't mean any trouble. We have a very sick crewmate, and it's life and—" She was cut off when someone shouted, "Shut up. Do you take us for idiots?" The man then pointed a gun at her, causing her to flinch a little. "We know how your kind acts. We accept with kindness, and the moment we turn our backs, you stab us and ruin our peaceful lives. Sanji then stepped forward. Hey, don't point that gun of yours at Nami's swan. He was then nudged by Nami to be quiet and not escalate the situation any further.
The man frowned as he silently said, talk about a shitty reception.
One of the men yelled, this is our country, and we decide who can enter. You're not welcome here, so lift your anchors and leave or you'll be forced to. Zoro then said, talk about being delusional. He was already beyond the point of chopping them down and going to find a doctor. One of the men then shoot a round at Sanji, who dodged it quickly as he said, that's it. Vivi, who exited the captain's room, saw what happened and quickly stopped Sanji. Please calm down. You're only going to make the situation much worse than it already is. The man grumbled under his breath but nodded his head. Another one then shot a bullet that managed to hit Vivi, which angered Luffy. How dare you? Every member of the crew then readied themselves to fight, but Vivi stopped them. The girl then said, please, this isn't something that is solved by fighting. Don't worry about me. She then bowed down and addressed the crowd. We promise that we only want a doctor for our sick crewmate. We won't cause any harm to anyone on this island. Luffy then asked, Vivi, what are you doing? We can't. Vivi then asked him, don't you care about Robin's health? Then just do what I do and everything will be fine. The boy hesitated a little but nodded his head at the end of this as he bowed down with Vivi. Please, the girl that I care about is sick. All I ask for is a doctor. A man from the crowd yelled, do you think that we're stupid enough to fall for your tricks? I bet that you're just deceiving us to be able to make it inside the... A voice then came from behind everyone, that's enough. All the crowd looked at a man wearing green armor walking up to the ledge. He looked down at the crew and said, you say that you're in need of a doctor and then you'll leave. Luffy replied quickly, yes, we are. I am sorry for before, but we desperately need one. The man eyed them for a moment before saying, fine, follow me into the village. Vivi looked at Luffy and smiled, see, Luffy. I told you that they were going to understand us. The boy nodded his head in appreciation. Luffy then went to bring Robin with the aid of Nami as the man said, but beware. The only doctor this island have is a witch. Luffy then came out with Robin wrapped in a couple of blankets all over her body. The crew decided to leave Vivi's duck and Zoro on the ship to watch out for the vessel. As soon as everyone left, the green-haired man stripped off his clothes much to Karu's shock, and began to train his body to withstand the elements by jumping into the lake. With the others, they looked at the man who said, this island has no name as of now, but it might soon enough. Vivi was quite shocked that there was an island that held no name to it, but they continued to walk nonetheless with the man they now knew was named Dalton. After an encounter with the local animals, they finally reached the village. They looked around and Luffy was amazed by the various animals but kept himself focused on the task at hand. Dalton, after talking with the townspeople about the arrivals and the upcoming elections, guided the crew toward their house. Once inside, the rubber boy asked him, is there a way to contact that witch doctor or not? The man replied, I will get to that shortly, but first, he looked at Vivi and said, have we met before? I can't help but feel that you're familiar. The girl shook her head, no, sir. You must be imagining things. I never saw this before in my life. But enough about that. How can we contact that doctor? Dalton walked up to Robin and checked her temperature, 42-degree fever. If it gets any higher then she'll most likely die. Luffy shook his head, no, she won't because we'll heal her. Vivi then added, the problem is we don't know the reason for this fever. Luffy thought for a moment and said, do you think it's because of the bug bite back on Little Garden? Vivi looked at him, I don't know, but I think it might be a probability given that the island is ancient, so most probably there are some dangerous diseases back there. Sanji then yelled, dangerous or not, all we have to do is bring that doctor a witch or not. Nami said, so can you tell us where she resides so we can go to her? The man then pointed outside the window and said, do you all see those mountains that are all over the island? The crew looked outside as Luffy nodded his head. Dalton then said, they are called the Drum Rockies. He then pointed at the one in the middle of the mountains. On that mountain is the doctor that you seek. She lives in a castle on the top of it. The crew gulped since they knew that their mission became much harder now. A rough walk to a mountain. A single sound could be heard across the room. It was the sound of disbelief and shock in one word that summarized how everyone felt at this very moment. What? Dalton coughed and explained to them everything. Well, Dr. Kureha lives in a castle on the top of that mountain. He then shook his head a little, and sadly enough she's the only doctor in the country, but her treatment methods make people call her a witch. Sanji looked outside the window with a huge frown. Damn it. We need to find a way to get into contact with her. He then looked at Robin. Her situation is getting worse by the second. Dalton sighed sadly. Well, I still have more bad news. We don't have a way to connect her. Sanji was shocked as Luffy yelled, there has to be a way. Robin's life is in extreme danger. Sanji then mumbled under his breath, damned woman, and she calls herself a doctor. Dalton then said, well, her skills are undeniable for she has treated people with various diseases. He then ran a hand through his face, however, she is considered to be a bit of a crazy person. This is why people call her a witch among other reasons such as her age being 140. Sanji then began to imagine her looks as he said, 140 years? How is she still alive? Nami shook her head, even though, is there anyone we can bring her here? We can't let Robin die. She's our friend and we don't want to see her in pain anymore. The look Dalton gave her made her deflate a little bit. The man then said in a solemn tone, well, as much as I want to, there is no way to force her to come here and help you guys. This caused them to tilt their heads.
Vivi then asked in a panicked tone, well, how do people get treated if there isn't any way to call her? This sounds ridiculous that the only doctor can't be reached.
Dalton then explained, well, to put it in simple terms, this woman comes down whenever she wants and goes around the villages and helps the people who need her, but as payment, she tends to take whatever she wants from them even if she left them penniless. Everyone was shocked by the description of the doctor. At this point, she seemed more like a vicious pirate rather than a doctor who helps the sick and weakened. Dalton then carried on, however something interesting about her is that eyewitness accounts say that once she comes from the mountain, she could be seen floating in her sleigh with a reindeer pulling her. I guess that's one of the main reasons people suspect that she's a witch. He then put a hand on his chin, plus, people also saw her moving around with some monster following her. This caused Usopp to begin to cry in fear, begging them not to go to her. Luffy in a burst of excitement jumped up, so cool, I should ask. He then shook his head, focus, heal Robin first, then talk about cool witch. Dalton talked once more, even though she's a doctor, she's of the people I prefer to have nothing to do with. He looked at them with a sympathetic look. All I can tell you is to wait and hope that she comes down and help you save your friend. I'm truly sorry. Nami flopped to the ground with an unreadable expression, so that's it, we're at her mercy. Sanji punched the door frame, what the hell, of all the places to end up lost in, it had to be the only country that has one doctor in its borders. How come the country has one doctor in the first place? He then turned to see Luffy walking up to Robin. Luffy then began to gently wake her up. Oi, Robin, beautiful flower. Sanji grumbled under his breath while Vivi couldn't help but swoon a bit. The black-haired girl opened her eyes as Luffy said, Robin, seems that the doctor lives upside some mountain. I will carry up there. Nami ran up to him and slapped him upside the head. Did you lose your mind, you idiot? Take her up there? What kind of lousy plan is this? Don't you have the slightest sense of reality? Luffy rubbed the back of his head, like I said, I'll carry here, and my plane is 10 times better than sitting and waiting here for the witch doctor that might or might not come, and I'm not risking it. Sanji then said, but still, it's very risky. I know you want her to heal, but the dangers are too. The boy cut him off, it'll be fine. I'm carrying her so nothing could possibly go wrong. Vivi argued, Captain Luffy, look at that mountain. It's roughly 3 miles at a 90-degree angle. You can't possibly hope to climb it without destroying your hands, and if Robin falls. Luffy sighed, look, I know that it's dangerous, but sitting here is even more so. Our best option right now is to climb that mountain even if it destroys my hands. Nami butted in, forget your hands, you might be able to handle it, but Robin can't. If she falls from that mountain, she'll most likely die. Aren't you afraid for her? The boy looked at her, of course, I am. But sitting here and waiting for a miracle to happen isn't going to do us any good. I'm going and that's final. Robin then supported herself and looked at Luffy. She remembered how Luffy carried her on his back on her island as he jumped from one tree to the other to their safety. I trust Luffy. Let's do it. Everyone looked at her and was shocked. Some started to argue with her, telling her to reconsider, while others were coming up with plans to make sure that she makes it safe up there. Nami then said, alright, give me a couple of blankets so I can put them on Robin while this numbskull climbs up with her. We need to make that she isn't vulnerable to the elements. While Nami was preparing Robin with Vivi, Sanji walked up to Luffy, oi, shitty captain. The boy looked at him, I'm coming with you to make sure that you reach this place in one piece. A couple of minutes later, Nami came and tied Robin to Luffy's back as Usopp warned him to be extra careful with her given that the slightest hit can cause her to die. Luffy promised to be extra careful with this journey knowing the risks. While Sanji and Luffy got ready to set off, Dalton gave them a warning, look, since you two seem serious about climbing this mountain, I suggest that you go to the other side of it since the top from this route is filled with lapins. These are carnivorous rabbits who are extremely hostile to anything. If you come across a pack, then there's no telling what might happen. Luffy smiled as he ran forward with Sanji with the man yelling, be careful, you moron. As the two went off, Usopp said, I hope that they can save Robin's life. I'll even begin listening to her morbid jokes, I don't want her to die. Dalton then said, I'm worried about the three of them. I hope that they all survive, these mountains aren't forgiving. One slip up and you're dead. This isn't going to be easy. Nami then said, well, given how Luffy loves Robin, I think everything will be alright. He won't give till she's in tip-top condition. This is kinda romantic in a way if you leave out the death part. Vivi then added, I hope that Robin hangs on till they reach the top. She doesn't seem so good. A huge puff of cold wind blew by them. Dalton looked at them. Why don't you go inside? It's getting rather cold and I'm sure that you folks aren't used to such cold temperatures. Nami declined. No, this reminds me of the nights that issued to in the cold weather at the sea. Vivi then said, I don't want to go inside, the weather is beautiful even if it's cold. Usopp tried to play the cold off saying, I'm not even cold. I still remember the time that The boy then went on to talk about a time when he fought yetis in a snowstorm on an iceberg that was quickly sinking into the sea while holding a baby on another iceberg. Dalton then sat on the ground. Well, if that's the case then I might as well join you people. The man looked around and sighed a bit. This wasn't the situation a few months ago. I mean the doctors, that is. There used to be doctors, however, something happened. Vivi then asked, what happened if I can ask? Dalton then said, a group of pirates attacked the Cod from the face of existence. 2 of them were shocked while the 3rd was sued to what cruelties pirates can do. It was a small group of 5 and their captain called himself Blackbeard, but they totally destroyed everything. Usopp whistled, wow, for such a small group of pirates to do this. They must have some serious firepower under their belts. But still, their attack, as destructive as it was, came with a hidden mercy, he said wistfully. The blue-haired girl then blurted out, what good can come from a destructive pirate attack that left an entire country in ruins? I failed to see the mercy in it. Usopp and Nami agreed with her. Well, you see, before that attack, we used to have an extremely cruel king who only cared about himself. Once the attack happened, he fled like a coward, taking the doctors with him. His name was Wapol, and this kingdom was named Drum Kingdom. This man was a despicable human being who only cared about filling his stomach with food. He was hated by the people for he had brought his country to ruin, but that he's gone was can rebuild it from the ground up. Nami then looked at the other 2. Wait, wasn't that the name of the man that we saw? Dalton looked at them. What are talking about? How do you know about him? Usopp then explained, when we're at sea, we were attacked by a pirate crew whose captain said his name was Wapol and that he was the king of Drum Island, but we threw him off board. Vivi then said, I know him. I remember from back at the Council of Kings when I was a kid. Dalton then lifted an eyebrow. Council of Kings, who just are you? People don't just go there for vacation. Are you perhaps royalty? The girl began to panic, but Nami rescued her. Nami quickly changed the subject and explained their encounter in detail. The man hummed, so that punk went to the sea and became a lowly pirate to hide his bag. Vivi shook her head. There's something I can't understand. Why is the king at sea? Why didn't he stay here? Were the forces too much that he was forced to escape the country? Wapol, that monster didn't lift a finger and didn't do anything, Dalton said with a scowl. What do you mean? Did he really just leave? The blue-haired girl asked, shocked that a king would just leave his people in their time of need. The moment it was clear that the pirates were too strong to resist, that bastard took the doctors of the countries and left to the sea, as I told you before. He didn't even lift a finger to stop them. The man explained, looking down at the ground with anger in his eyes. Vivi then yelled, he just left. What kind of king just leaves his people to the wolves? Everyone looked at her and she said, how cruel for a king to let his people die while he lives happily. I don't know how he can do that and sleep at night. Dalton then said, it is for that reason the pirate attack was a hidden mercy. With Wapol gone, we can begin a new country for those who are left behind. Nami smiled, that sounds nice. I hope that you all find peace after that. Dalton smiled, that is what I hope. We are in the process of beginning a new country away from Wapol and his influence. That's why I dread the return of Wapol, for he will reverse everything 1,000 years back. All our sacrifices will be lost. He looked in the distance, that's why we will protect this at all costs. Sanji and Luffy were currently walking to the bottom of the mountain holding the castle. Luffy then said, man, the weather is really cold. I feel my toes are being frozen as we speak. Sanji yelled, why the hell are you wearing sandals in the goblin snow? Just looking at them makes me feel extremely cold on your behalf. Luffy shrugged, sorry, but that's my policy in life. Plus, it makes my feet feel much more comfortable compared to when I use shoes. It keeps them free just like I like them. Sanji looked at him and raised an eyebrow. I highly doubt that you even know what the word policy even means to begin with. He was cut off by Luffy. Hey, just because I act a little dumb for comic relief, it doesn't mean I don't have brain power. The boy scoffed, looking away, causing Sanji to apologize. The two then continued to talk as they ran, not noticing a new guest being added to their midst. Luffy suddenly asked him, do you know that people in snowy countries don't ever sleep? Sanji looked at him surprised. Huh? How come? I never heard of something like that. Well, if they slept, they are going to die. Sanji looked at him, contemplating if he should tell him that he was a moron, but chose to shake his knee at this idiocy. Luffy looked at him and frowned. What? You don't believe me? I swear that it's true. A guy told me once when I was in a bar back in my village, even Robin knows it. They both heard some type of growl and looked back only to see a small rabbit chasing them, but they decided to ignore it. The little ball of fur then went and started to attack them. Sanji then said, how there's a bed in Dalton's house. He stopped for a moment, ducking as the rabbit passed by him, asking another question. Well, Robin slept. How come she didn't die? The rabbit bit into a tree, breaking it in half as Luffy answered Sanji. Well, the bed must be for the time that he dies. He then added, plus, Robin isn't from a snow island. That's why she can sleep without dying. It's only logical that she isn't affected by this. Sanji facepalmed, jumping to the side from another attack from the rabbit. That's stupid. Sanji then said, do you know that women from snowy countries have smooth skins? Luffy shut him down entirely as he jumped from an attack. Look Sanji, I like you and all, but you're a pervert and I have a girlfriend. I can't think about these things with her life on the line. Sanji then burst into flames, melting some snow. Rub it in my face, why won't you? The small rabbit monster let out a huge roar as it attacked Sanji, who was already pissed off, but the cook kicked it hard. Leave us the fuck alone. And, this thing is annoying. Luffy then said, what's up with that thing? Do you think that's the Lapin that Dalton Man spoke about? He said, jogging. Hang in there, Robin. We're almost there. Sanji then berated him, be careful. You could hurt her running like a savage in the snow. They both then stopped as they looked in front of them as an army of huge rabbits stood facing them. Sanji said, I guess that the baby rabbit is pissed off about me kicking him. Back with the rest of the crew, Dalton looked up and said, I hope they're fine. Those Lapins are quite troublesome if you come across them. This made the crew worried. Nami then said, they can't be that bad. I mean sure they eat meat, but they're still cute rabbits. Usopp cursed Nami silently for tempting fate to mess with them. Dalton then said, yeah, the only thing that sets them apart from regular rabbits is that they're the size of a bear, have agility that is found nowhere else, and hunt in packs. Usopp deflated into the ground. Yeah, they're the picture-perfect example of cute bunnies. Dalton then saw a lady walking up to him. Hey, Dalton, didn't you say that you had a patient in your house that needed immediate medical attention? The man nodded his head only for the woman to say, well, guess what? Dr. Kureha went down her mountain to the neighboring village. Everyone then fell to the ground, shocked at this unprecedented turn of events. In a nearby village, a child was crying inside a bar as his father tried to get to the root of the problem because they were about to be kicked out due to the disturbance the child was causing. Outside the bar, a lady was walking with her pet reindeer. Do you hear that, Chopper? Hee. The woman patted her pet and carried on. A child's cry is a sure sign of a disease. The woman then walked up to the door and yelled, ready or not? Here, I come. She then punched it open, shocking everyone inside the bar as they yelled, DD Dr. Kureha? The woman walked in with a smile. That's my oot because I still need it. She then asked everyone, do you want to know the secret of my youth? No one said anything except one brave soul who pointed out, but you look ancient. The woman then punched him so hard, he went flying through the wall as she yelled, hey, listen here punk and listen well. I'm still in my youthful years. No one dared to say otherwise. She then looked at the father. Do you want me to heal your son or do you want him to cry his eyes out till they run out of tears? The man looked confused, but my son isn't sick, he's just throwing a tantrum. Kureha smirked, and are you a doctor like I am? He was silent. The woman then put the child on the table and her bag. She looked at her reindeer. Let's go, Chopper. The boy looked at her and whined, my hand hurts. The woman hummed a little, examining him. She then grabbed his leg and squeezed it. Tell me, does this hurt? The boy began to yell in pain. The father began to yell in protest, but the woman carried on with her work, not minding him. She quickly discovered that there was an infection in the bone of his leg. She looked at her reindeer and said, Chopper, go and fetch the antibiotics. The woman looked at the man. Consider yourself lucky that this can be solved in its early stages, but to be honest, your son was one step away from visiting the cemetery. The man was scared. The woman then began her treatment of the boy, though he seemed that he was about to die in her hands, but when she stopped, she gave the father some instructions. The woman then said, as for your payment, I need some toilet paper, food, rum, and 50% of your money. This caused an outrage in the bar with people calling her a con. But all this stopped when the child thanked her for helping him feel better, causing the father to pay up. With that, the doctor left the bar looking for another target to heal and swindle his money away. Back with the crew, the guys were with Dalton on a sleigh pulled by two dogs trying to catch up with the witch doctor. Dalton apologized to them. I'm sorry. I heard that she went down yesterday, so I assumed we won't see her till a couple of days later, but I jumped to conclusions. Usopp then said, this isn't your fault, so don't worry about it. Dalton then said, the problem is now with your crewmates. Even if we rush up the mountain, we won't be able to reach them in time, so the best we can hope is that we reach the doctor and convince her to go back to her castle so she can meet them up there. The man then apologized again, only for Vivi and Nami to counter again, telling him that this isn't his fault. The man then focused on the trip ahead of him. Back with Sanji and Luffy, they both jumped away as one of the huge rabbits attacked them. Sanji then said, that thing can jump this high? What is it? Some kind of gorilla? Luffy then said, it must be that Lapin that Dalton told us about. The rabbits attacked again, but Sanji kicked one of them away, only for both of them to see an army of huge rabbits looking back at them, making them feel worried. Luffy then readied himself to fight, but Sanji lifted his hand. Don't even think about it, Luffy. The boy looked at him confused. You may be in a condition that allows you to fight, but Robin isn't. Any movement is fatal to her. Luffy nodded his head as the rabbits began to attack them both, with Sanji trying to hold them at bay, but finally, they were forced to run away from them. This caused the rabbit to give them chase as Sanji said, "They're following us, damn it." Luffy yelled, "I don't care. We have to try and lose them or else Robin might die." On the shores of the island, Waipol's ship landed as the greedy king looked with a goofy expression. "I'm so happy that I finally returned to my island. I bet the people missed their king." He said this while his highest guards stood on the defeated forms of the island's coast guard. The man then looked into the distance. "Oh, look at this sight. Those majestic mountains oversee everything else." He then looked at one of his chiefs. "Chess, tell me if my castle is still fine." Chess was the sad clown-looking man. The man replied, "Your Majesty, the castle seems to be fine. We can head to it right now if you want." The man then cheered in happiness. "Then let's move to my castle, men. I can't wait to go back to being a king and let behind the miserable life of a pirate on the high seas." The man then kicked his woolly hippo. "All right, let's get moving, Robson." The hippo didn't move, but it only let out annoyed puffs of steam from its nose. "What's the matter with you? Don't tell me you're still sad about your brother. I'll make it up to you by giving you more food." This seemed to appease the creature as it began to move. As the king prepared to go to his castle, one of his men came running saying they had something important to say. Wapol looked at him. "What do you have to me?" "Your Majesty, the pirates we encountered." The soldier then pointed his finger into the distance. "Their ship is on the island. It's docked over there. What are your orders?" Wapol was furious that the Straw Hats had come to his island after what happened between them, so he yelled, "Go and kill everyone you find on the ship." The soldier then said, "But sir, there is no one on the ship, right now." Chess then said, "They seem to be incompetent, leaving behind footprints that will lead them to their location. I don't think that they're smart." Kuromarimo, the second chief of Wapol, said, "Judging by the direction, this leads to Big Horn, sir." Wapol scowled angrily. "Well then let's head to Big Horn. Let's begin the return of Drum Kingdom by exterminating some S from the face of existence." Dalton sighed heavily with Usopp and the others as he leaned back into his chair. "She already left. I can't believe that we missed her. I guess we have to head back to my village then." Usopp slumped onto the floor and said, "We missed her. That's so depressing." A child looked at Dalton and said, "She treated my leg a little ago. I think my dad might know where she is heading. I heard him talking to her." Nami then walked up to his father. "Please sir, can you tell us where she is? My friend is sick and we really need her help." The man rubbed the back of his head and said, "I'm not sure, but I heard her talking about going to Gyasta." Vivi then asked, "And where is this town?" Dalton explained, "It is a town by a lake further up north. It is a popular place for ice skating." Nami then said, "All right, let's start heading there. Every minute we waste standing here and talking with each other might cause Robin her life. I'm going outside to get ready." The doors of the bar were opened by a man who seemed that he had been through hell and back. Dalton looked at him, shock evident on his face. "Aren't you supposed to be?" The man cut him off. "Dalton, we were protecting the coast, but suddenly a ship emerged from the sea and took everyone down except me. You gotta help us." Dalton then placed his hands on the man's shoulders. "Calm down so I can understand you." The man looked at him with a dreadful face. "He's back, Dalton. Wapol is back, and he seems that he is heading toward Big Horn as we speak." Dalton then ran out of the bar and rode a horse toward his village, but he was transforming into a hybrid of an ox and man with the only thing on his mind ending Waipol's reign once and for all. The man jumped from the horse becoming a full ox as he charged toward Wapol. Back with the crew, they jumped on the sleigh they came with to head toward Gyasta, but they got lost on the way due to the terrain being extremely snowy, and they missed a sign pointing toward the village that they needed to go to. Meanwhile, calls of arming and mobilization were being called across the entire kingdom to protect it for Wapol. People began arming them and heading toward Big Horn to fight. In Big Horn, Wapol stood munching on the remains of the village, having destroyed most of it. The village was on fire, and all of its houses were all around. The man then stood up and yelled, "This was delicious. This country and everything in it are nothing but a snack to me." His men then began to praise him. Kuromarimo then said, "Your Majesty, according to the reports, the pirates are heading toward your castle on the Drum Rocky." This confused the Mad King, but his second chief in command explained, "It seems one of their crewmates is sick, and they heard that the witch Dr. Kureha resides in your castle, so they headed there to get her healed." Waipol's eyes expanded. "What? That crazy hag is living in my castle. I'll have her executed for this." He then looked at his men, straight ahead to the castle. He didn't manage to finish his statement as Dalton came down on him, striking him with his weapon. The man fell to the ground bleeding from Dalton's hit. "That's as far as you go." Waipol's men were in shock. No one dared to hurt their king like that. The man himself was yelling on the ground, "I'm bleeding. I'm going to die. Somebody, save me." Dalton stood up and said, "That was what I was hoping for, Wapol. You have no place here. Leave and never come back." Chess and Kuromarimo then pointed their weapons at Dalton, wondering how was he alive, but the man pointed out that Drum Kingdom was known for its medical knowledge, so they shouldn't be surprised that he cheated death. Kuromarimo then said, and speaking of medical knowledge, mid-20 come out and heal your king. A couple of doctors wearing surgery garments came out and began healing Wapol till he was brand new, much to Dalton's anger and irritation. The man hummed happily as he looked at Dalton. And what did you say? Wapol, I'm sure that it's, Your Majesty, for you, Dalton. The people began to shout at him, telling him to leave the island and never come for the crimes that he committed. Dalton then said, you took all the doctors for yourself and then forced the people to take impossible measures to get treatment, and even after that you humiliated them. The man clenched his fist. No citizen should be turned a hostage inside his own country. That's a crime against humanity, and your crime ends here. Wapol crossed his arms and looked at him. Did you finish your nonsense? You did? Good. He looked at his soldiers and ordered them, kill this man. Dalton then began to transform. I was trying to talk out things with you, hoping you would see the error of your ways because your father was a great man. But it appears I was wrong in thinking that you would ever become a human being. The man then resembled the hybrid from before, and Wapol's men began to panic. This is the power ox fruit. Model bison. Be careful and shoot. Dalton quickly dodged all of their bullets, shocking them before taking them down with one attack, fiddle-bamf, leaving Wapol and his two chiefs. The people were amazed by Dalton's power, saying that it was the power of a wild animal present inside of a zone-type devil fruit. Dalton then repeated his earlier threat, you have no place here. A kingdom that abandoned its people in their moment of need is better off destroyed, so leave before I force. Chess scoffed, look at him going on and spewing stupid nonsense. Kuromarimo mocked him, Dalton, we used to be chiefs together. Even you know that you can't face me and Chess at the same time. Give up. Chess then lifted a bow and pointed the arrows at something. We've known for far too long, so that means the arrows were being pointed at the people fighting with Dalton. I know what hurts you the most. The people ran toward Dalton, telling him that they came to support him only to see him impaled by 3 large arrows as Chess mocked him. That soft heart of yours is your downfall. Suddenly everything began to shake, with Luffy and Sanji a few moments ago. Sanji looked back to notice that the huge rabbits have stopped chasing them, causing him to ask, did they stop, but why? Luffy frowned as he tightened the binds holding Robin to his back. I don't know, but I have a bad feeling about this. Something doesn't feel right. Sanji turned his attention to the rabbits, who for some odd reason began to jump up and down. He didn't know what they were doing till it was too late to stop them. Don't tell me that they're causing. He saw an onslaught of snow heading toward them, an avalanche. He grabbed Luffy and yelled, start running, Luffy. The rubber boy did as he was told, trying to hopelessly outrun the oncoming snow. I swear that when I see those rabbits next time, I'll make them a delicious soup for you to eat. Luffy yelled through the noise, what do we do now? We can't outrun it forever. Sanji replied, I don't know. I never thought that we'd face suicidal death bunnies today. The only thing I care about is protecting Robin Schwan with our lives. This made Luffy frown. Luffy then asked, and how do we do that if we die from being buried alive? Sanji then looked around and saw a cliff and pointed toward it. Let's go to that cliff and hide there till the snow calms down and settle. Luffy nodded his head and they both reached the cliff, only to be shocked that they weren't high enough and were about to be covered in snow. They were thrown into the air, and Sanji was about to be taken away by the snow, but Luffy caught him at the last moment and used a broken tree as a surfing board. But their problem now was that all of their progress was being taken away as they went down with the snow. Sanji snarled, all of our hard work to save Robin Schwan is doing down the drain due to some filthy rabbits. I swear that I'll make them into stew the next time I catch them. Luffy saw something and nudged Sanji, Sanji, we have guests. He then pointed at something. The blonde-haired man turned his gaze toward the place where Luffy pointed, for the love. Using tree barks as surfing boards, the rabbits were still giving chase to Luffy and Sanji, angering the blonde man more than he already was. Alright. That tears it. I'm going to make them extinct. The bunnies began to attack them, with Sanji trying his best to defend them, but the blonde man suddenly pushed Luffy off the tree. Luffy was shocked. What are you doing? Sanji smiled, what a gentleman would do. Protecting a lady. The tree then crashed into a rocky cliff, shredding it into pieces as Sanji was dragged beneath the snow. Luffy tried to save him, but Sanji's mitt slipped off the man's hand. Luffy then put Robin with hat down on the same rocky cliff that they almost died on. Hang tight, Robin. I'll be back. I just need to save Sanji. The boy felt a gentle squeeze. He wasn't if it was real or not, but he smiled nonetheless before diving into the snow. Back in the village, Wapol saw the snow coming their way, so he yelled, Chess, Kuromarimo, hop on Robson, so he can leave this place and get out of danger. Wapol's other man began to run away in fear, but the man hardly cared. As he was making his way to safety, the doctors begged him to take them with him, but his only reply was for them to find a way of their own to survive. But they were all eventually engulfed by the snow that stampeded over everything it came in contact with. A few moments later, Wapol came out of the snow and spat out Robson, Kuromarimo, and Chess. The man was fuming. Didn't you say that the brats were going up to my castle? One of his chiefs nodded. So they must have made this avalanche to slow me down. I'll teach them a lesson when I see them. Back at the top of the mountain, a lapin was trying to dig one of its parents out of the snow. It then heard a commotion nearby and turned to see Luffy walking with Robin tied to his back and Sanji being held by him on his shoulder. The boy looked at it and walked toward it. The creature growled at the boy but was shocked when he freed its parent from the snow. The small lapin hugged its parent as they watched the boy walk into the distance. Luffy looked at the drum mountain and said, "I'll get us up there, but don't die on me, both of you." Luffy continued to walk till a vice caught his attention. The boy looked back to distinctly make out the idiot he threw off his ship not a day back. "Let's kill them all, my lord. The transforming doctor." Luffy didn't stop when he heard someone calling out to him. He only cared about reaching the mountain where he can treat his friends. He kept walking, his eyes fixed on the bottom of the mountain where he would begin to climb to the castle. However, fate had other plans for him as Wapol managed to intercept him and stand in his way. The ex-pirate then said, "You little twerp, stop." The man looked at him with an annoyed and somewhat disgusted look. "You have disrespected far too many times. You need to pay for your transgressions." The boy looked at him with a vein on his forehead. "Get out of my way, you dumb moron. I don't have time for idiots like you." He tried to move, but Wapol's hippo stopped him. The user of the munch munch fruit then said, "Huh?" He looked at the two Luffy was holding and laughed. "What, have you lost your mind? Why would I do that? And what the hell are you doing with these two meatbags? Leave them be. They're going to die anyways." Luffy then jumped over them and continued to walk away from them, ignoring the man who began shouting at him to come back. "Look at him, and stop ignoring him." Luffy didn't do anything except keep walking forward, but something he heard made him tense. Wapol said, "Hey, Chess." The clown-looking man looked at Wapol. "I made a new law that dictates that anyone who ignores me or turns his back to me will die immediately." Luffy's eyes widened as he heard Wapol yell, "Now go and kill that idiot. Make him and his friends suffer. Kill his friends and then kill him." The man had a satisfied smile on his face when he saw his two chiefs attack Luffy, who jumped away to avoid them. Kuromarimo then lifted his fist and metal spikes emerged from them. Iron spike. Luffy jumped away from the attack, leaving a dent in the ground, causing the boy to panic. He then ducked under an arrow shot by Chess. This was becoming increasingly troublesome. Luffy was about to fight back, but he then remembered Sanji's words back when they fought the rabbits. He remembered how the blonde told him that Robin was in no state to handle any feedback or hits from any fight, so he now did what he thought was the best option at the moment. He turned around and began to run as fast as his feet could carry. Chess threw an arrow in his way. "Come back here and fight us, you coward." The man threw another arrow, but his frown increased when the boy managed to avoid it by jumping above it. Luffy, still running, yelled, "Damn it. Leave me alone, you freaks. I don't want to fight you. I beat you three anyway. You aren't that strong, to begin with." This enraged Wapol. The man then yelled, "Anyone who manages to get me that brat's head will be rewarded handsomely." The two men then began to increase their attacks, hoping to hit him. Chess then said, "Stop running and just accept your fate. You aren't doing anything, but delaying the inevitable." The man threw an arrow, but Luffy jumped over it. However, there was another threat. Kuromarimo then dashed toward the boy and tried another attack, but the boy avoided him. The boy ran away from them, but he then heard Winter Empire's secret technique, hiding in the snow. Suddenly, Wapol emerged from the snow, opening his mouth wide, but Luffy jumped above, putting both his legs on his jaws before jumping away and running from them. He needed to get away from this crazy king, but suddenly the boy was blindsided by Chess and Kuromarimo. They both tried to attack him, but something happened that caused everyone to be shocked. Two huge lapins came out of nowhere and attacked the two chiefs, kicking them from Luffy and catching everyone by surprise. As Chess said, "Did those feral creatures just help them?" Luffy looked at them with shock on his face. "White bear?" The lapins looked at them and nodded at him, causing him to keep moving on. The boy then ran away. Wapol looked with a horrified look on his face. What in the world happened here? Did those monsters go out of their way to help this brat? Kuromarimo then sneered, "Well, this isn't something you see every day. What happened here?" Chess then said, "I still can't believe that those mindless beasts just defended him, and he's getting away." He then looked at the white huge rabbits and said, "You'll pay for this." One of the lapins then looked at Luffy, and the boy saw the little rabbit as the older one flexed its muscles while Wapol yelled, "Do something, you idiots. He's running away." The boy looked back at the lapins. "Thank you for helping me get away from here. Good luck." The boy kept running away from Wapol and his crazy bunch as the base of the mountain began to grow closer and closer to him until he finally managed to reach it. The boy looked to the top of the mountain and sighed. This was going to be a rough climb. The boy then said confidently, "Don't worry, guys. It's only a small climb. I'll get you to the doctor in no time." The boy felt the wind pick up, but he didn't care as he tightened the knot around Robin's waist and put Sanji's jacket into his mouth, grabbing the man in his jaw tightly. Luffy then threw off his sandals and grabbed the wall, and he began to climb the seemingly endless mountain. It was a rough climb. Many times, during the climb, he would almost lose his footing and almost fall, but he would grab himself at the last moment. He just can't fail right now. He made it this far, so he has to keep going. There's no turning back right now. Luffy was already 3 hours into his climb to reach the top of the mountain. It was a hard and painful climb. He can already feel his fingers beginning to suffer from frostbite, but then one of his fingernails snapped when put his hand on the mountain. The boy screamed in pain, but this let Sanji fall. The boy's eyes almost bugged out as he saw the blonde man fall. The boy quickly stretched his neck and grabbed the man. He mentally sighed and continued to climb the mountain. The boy continued to climb the mountain, telling himself that he wouldn't fail this and can't stop. He kept climbing as the wind blew in his face, but he then began to see the top. This caused the boy to pick up the pace and climb as fast as he can, given that he was in a bad condition himself and can feel his body begging to stop moving. Once he reached the top, he put his 2 companions down as he looked at the castle and said, "Didn't I tell you that I'm going to bring you to the doctor?" He then passed out but began to roll backward. Someone then grabbed him and pulled him with the other 3 back. The man who saved their lives looked like he was a Yeti or Bigfoot with brown fur all over his body. He was also wearing a hat atop his head similar to the one the reindeer following the crazy old doctor was wearing. He then grabbed them and quickly ran to the castle to give them medical attention. Back on the ground, Wapol stood upon the defeated Lapins. Ha 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 ha. The man crossed his arms with a victorious look on his face. "You are just rabbits. Did you really think that you can beat me, King Wapol of the Drum Kingdom?" Kuromarimo then said, "I still find it hard to believe that those monsters actually protected someone, and they also forced us to use our real power." Chess added, "Well, after this, I think that everything is possible. And it's only natural to use our power. Those monsters are the strongest creatures of this island." Wapol then kicked one of the huge rabbits, exclaiming, "I'll get you for this, you damned brat." Somewhere in the snow, Vivi and Nami dragged Usopp from his nose after miraculously managing to survive the avalanche. Vivi was saying to him, "Come on, Usopp. Stay with us." She then heard the boy begin to mumble, which made her feel happy as she looked at Nami and said, "Usopp is talking, so he must have woken up." The orange-haired girl smiled. "Well, that means that we won't need to drag him anymore. Good thing he woke. I was beginning to become tired." The blue-haired girl's sweat dropped at Nami's priorities. She then heard the boy mumble, "What is this beautiful white place that I'm sleep forever here? This place also has a beautiful white garden too." Vivi's face paled as she grabbed Nami and began to shake her back and forth. "Nami, he's going to do what we're gonna do. We already have Robin on death's door. We don't need another there." Nami yelled through her dizziness, "I can't do anything if you keep shaking me like this." Vivi then stopped shaking her as the Orangeette looked at her and said, "Thank you." The girl walked up to Usopp, who was still mumbling like a crazy person, and said, "Usopp, I'm going to give you one chance to snap out of this or you'll suffer the consequences." Vivi raised an eyebrow, but Nami carried on, "Oh, I guess that you won't snap out of it, and we technically don't have time for this, so don't blame anyone but yourself." The only thing that was heard after that was the sound of a fist colliding with someone's head. A couple of moments later, Usopp was glaring at Nami. "Are you insane? I was almost dying and the first thing you thought was punching me in the head." The girl shrugged, making the boy yell, "What would have happened if I actually died from your hits?" The girl looked at him and frowned. "You didn't die, so stop whining about it. Everything's fine." The boy wanted to protest some, but Vivi intervened. "I'm sure Nami means well, Usopp. She was very worried about you when you were out." The boy stopped a little but still glared at the orange-haired girl, who didn't seem to care one bit. Vivi then added, "Plus, we need to focus on reaching Dalton's hometown so we can talk with him." The girl rubbed her shoulder and said, "He seemed quite startled when he left the bar." Usopp replied, "I mean, if the man who ruined my life and many others appeared after abandoning everything, I would be a little uncomfortable." Nami then retorted, "You're always uncomfortable when it comes to fighting." The boy and the girl began to argue as Vivi laughed a little at their behavior, but suddenly something emerged from the snow, scaring the three. But once they got a clearer look, they were confused when they saw Zoro rubbing his body to try and find warmth. Zoro then shuddered in the cold. "Man, I was training when the avalanche happened and I got buried in it." He then rubbed his shoulders. Perhaps training naked in the snow was a bad idea after all. Usopp then yelled, "What the hell do you think you're doing in the middle of the snow half naked?" Zoro then looked at them and asked, "What are guys doing here in the middle of nowhere?" This caused the three to yell back at him, "You tell us first what you were doing here." After a small explanation, Nami punched him on the head. "Don't you have any sort of self-preservation mode? You could have died here and no one even would have known." The man looked at her and growled, "How the hell do you think you're punching, witch?" The man's only reply was another punch to the head. "Don't act like this when you're the one who almost killed himself." She turned around and then added, "Besides, don't you have any manners? The nerve of you to ask a lady her age." She stomped on the ground and walked away. Zoro rubbed the back of his head. "What's her problem?" Usopp then said, "Word of advice. Never ask a lady her age or say she looks old because they beat you up like what happened with that old woman you encountered." The man nodded his head. Vivi then said, "But still swimming in the cold river was a reckless move, Zoro." The man shrugged, "I was only training my body." The whole purpose was to make it resist the elements. He shuddered some more, but it worked in the end. I'm better than I used to be. Usopp coughed into his hand loudly. I highly doubt that, but sure, whatever makes you happy. They kept walking but eventually stopped when they saw the villagers of Dalton's hometown standing in front of an army of soldiers who were stopping them from doing something. Zoro rubbed the back of his head. Don't they all look a bit familiar? Usopp scratched his nose and asked, now that you mention it, they do. He then remembered where they saw them. Aren't they Weipal's men? What are they doing here and what's happening? One of the villagers saw them and stepped forward. You need to help us. He looked at the fore. Dalton is trapped under the snow and he might die, but those men won't allow to dig him out. The villager looked at Zoro closely and yelled, and what the heck is wrong with you? Wear your clothes. You'll die if you stay like this. Zoro then tried to take his jacket, but the man stopped him. Go and steal someone else's clothes. I still need these, or I'll die as well. The villagers were all trying to free Dalton from the snow as they yelled at the soldiers who only replied that they only do their king's will. Zoro then said, they work for that Wapol guy, right? His face became harder, so that means they are our enemy since Wapol is our enemy, so I can beat them up. Usopp looked at him, and they say that you aren't smart. Yeah, you can beat them up. The man smiled as he quickly moved and punched one of the soldiers unconscious, stealing his jacket. Man, I feel much better now. He began to pat himself on the back. One of the men yelled, hey, how do you think you're attacking His Majesty's men? Zoro looked at them devilishly and asked, remind me, who are you people again? And with that, the rest was history. In the doctor's castle, a small voice yelled, Doctrinu, the antidote is working. The woman nodded her head as the voice asked again, can you tell me how did it work and what caused this in the first place? The figure then began explaining what happened. Inside a laboratory, Robin could be seen inside a bed. The raven-haired beauty began to stir and move till she finally woke up from her sleep. The girl looked around and observed her surroundings. A small smile made it on her face, so he did make it up here. I never doubted him for a moment. The girl then looked around till she saw something intriguing. It was a small bipedal reindeer. The girl then coughed into her fist and looked at it. Hello, she said in the softest voice possible to not scare him. This proved to be useless as the creature stumbled back in fear. The creature then stared at her for a brief moment, but the scrambled and hid behind the door, causing her to chuckle a little. It was hiding the wrong way with most of its body appearing. Robin then smiled, you're hiding the wrong way, little one. She then made an arm that poked its nose, causing a blush to appear on its face as it hid the right way. The girl then spoke, my name is Nico Robin. Can you help me look for my boyfriend? He's my age and wears a straw hat on his head most of the time. The creature came running in and pushed her into her bed. No, you can't just move out of the body yet. Your body is still recovering. You might hamper the recovery process. He then added, plus, the boy that you're talking about is sleeping somewhere else. Robin then smiled, forming arms that picked the creature up, and she hugged him. Aren't you the cutest little thing ever? By the way, did you eat a devil fruit like me? Was it one that gave reindeer-like features? The creature looked at her curiously. You aren't afraid of me? He shook his head. You don't think I'm a scary-looking monster? He looked down in what she thought was pain and sadness. She then hugged him tighter. Of course, not. You're cute. I already like you. She then smiled, and if I know my boyfriend, he'll definitely ask you to join his crew. She left out the part that said, if he doesn't try to eat you when he sees you. She then asked, so aren't you going to give me a name? The creature looked at it and contemplated if it should tell her or not, but a voice interrupted your conservation. Chopper, before you introduce yourself next time, ask the patient if it's feeling better or not. The now named Chopper then jumped and bowed. You're right, Doctrine. I'm sorry. I promise that I won't do this mistake ever again. The girl looked around and saw an Eld with a bottle of beer in her hand. The girl was concerned for the woman's health and asked, ma'am, are you sure that you can drink that? I'm that drinking is bad for your age. She noticed the woman's hand twitch a little. The woman walked up to her and whacked her on the head, causing the small creature in her arms to fall to the ground and yell in fear. Dr. Kureha, you can't just attack your patients. The woman looked at him and said, go check over the others before I make you into a sweater. The woman then began to check over Robin. Well, you seem to be quite fine. You were even cracking jokes about my age. She then looked at Robin, and just for reference, I'm still in my youthful 130. And like Chopper said, my name is Kureha. It's a pleasure to meet you awake and not at death's door. The girl then asked, can I know what happened to me? I felt that I was about to boil over and do. The woman slapped her fondly on the cheek. That's because you were one day away from joining my dear mother in heaven. Robin paled. Your boyfriend brought you here in time. The woman then asked her, do you want to know the secret of my youth? Robin's sweat dropped a little, but she politely refused the offer, making the woman huff in amusement. Robin then inquired, can you tell me what caused this to happen to me? You never gave me an answer when I asked the first time. The woman walked up to her with a smile on her face and grabbed her hand, turning it around. Sweetie, you were bitten by a bug named Kasha. Its poison can kill anyone in 5 days. You're lucky we were the nearest island since the entire world doesn't have the antidote anymore. The girl gasped and laughed a little nervously. Well, I guess I can say that I'm the luckiest girl in the world. My luck must be something to have that bug bite me. Now that you mention it, the girl looked at her doctor. How did it bite you? I mean, you weren't walking around in the jungle and you just swatted a random bug which happened to be a kasha. The girl remembered when she swatted a bug off Nami back at Little Garden, but she didn't linger much on the thought because the woman pushed her to sleep. Go to sleep, little girl. You still need to rest your body after it fought for your life. The girl leaned back, but I had to ask, who is that little cute thing that was here? The woman looked at her and laughed. You like him? I'm surprised. Most people are afraid of him. The woman rubbed her chin, but then again, you aren't Ms. Normal yourself, are you? Robin tilted her head. Ah, you mean my devil fruit. I ate it when I was much younger. The woman hummed a little. Well, we can talk much more about this in the next few weeks. Robin then yelled, what? But I can't wait that much. The woman looked at her with a smile. My friend needs to be taken to her country very soon or else everything will be lost. The woman walked up to Robin and slammed a scalpel beside her. You'll only leave when I say so, got it? The girl nodded her head carefully. Good? She then sat on a chair and heard a commotion coming from the other room. Your friends must have woken and are annoying Chopper if the noise is anything. But for your question about Chopper, he is a special case where an animal ate a fruit that gave him human features. You can imagine the hell that caused. The woman smiled fondly. You all should be happy he found you on my doorstep and brought you in. All of you were about to fall down the mountain if it wasn't for Chopper catching you. He's also my medical assistant in this castle. She then smiled happily. That's why I teach him everything I know about the medical world. A few moments ago, in the room beside Robin, Chopper was tending to the wounds of Sanji and Luffy. He then heard the rubber boy stir in his sleep. He didn't make much of it until he turned and saw the boy looking at him with drool falling down his mouth. I want some delicious deer meat. Chopper slowly backed away till he hit Sanji's bed. He then heard the blonde man talking about the greatest ways to cook deer meat. This finally caused him to snap and run away with the other two chasing him down to eat him. They kept chasing him around till he finally had enough and transformed into a bulkier form of himself, slamming them both into the ground. I am not food, you idiotic humans. Both of the men were then knocked out for a couple of minutes, but Kurei had dragged them to her office. She sat down as she worked on some medicine in her lab. Luffy then woke up with Sanji and they both looked around. Where's the meat? I need to eat. Kurei had then said, calm down, boy. He then looked at her and she said, so you're the one who did the impossible and climbed the mountain. I had to say that I'm impressed. The boy forgot his hungry and asked her, are you the witch doctor of this castle that everyone down in Big Horn talks about? The boy was kicked in the face and fell to the ground. Kurei had then said, didn't they ever teach you to respect your elders, brat? The boy rubbed his head. I'm sorry, but still, are you the doctor that the people talk about? The woman looked at him and asked, what do I look to you, boy? A wizard from the West Blue. The boy rubbed the back of his head. I know that there's the tree of knowledge in the West Blue, but nothing about wizards. The woman looked at Sanji and said, seriously, this guy is your leader. What are you guys planning to do? The woman pointed to the ocean outside her window. Sail into your doom. The woman looked at the boy and nodded her head, which made Luffy say, I want you to join our auntie. We're in desperate need of a doctor and you'd be perfect. The woman responded by kicking him once more in the face and telling him to watch his tone with her or there'll be more pain in his future. Luffy kept trying to convince her only to get rapidly beaten down by her because he was accidentally making references to her age. Meanwhile, during the entire conservation, Chopper was by the door hiding the wrong way as he thought if those people were truly pirates. He didn't have much time to think about it because both men saw him. And with that another chase began around the castle, but this time with the doctor tailing the two men threatening to end their lives if they harmed her reindeer. It was a hilarious scene for Robin. She was watching them from an eye she made on Kurei's eyeglasses after she requested that from the doctor and the woman expected. She did also try to find the source of a drift she was feeling, but Chopper entered the room. She looked at him and smiled. How are you doing, Chopper? Can you please close the door for me? I'm a little cold, and the doctor forbade me from moving too much. The small reindeer yelled, all right, you stupid human. He then closed the door, but then asked in a nicer voice, how are you now? Do you feel better? Even though Doctrinu's medicine is strong and the fever is almost gone, but we need to be sure. The girl smiled, yes, I'm already beginning to feel better. In fact, I can thoroughly say I can leave at any time, but your mentor is the one keeping me here. The reindeer then screamed, that's because she only wants what's best for you, stupid human. The girl wasn't bothered by this, but smiled in his face and said, and thank you for taking care of me. She was shocked when the reindeer began dancing while insulting her. It was a funny scene if you asked her, but it was cute and befitting the smaller creature. So, tell me, Chopper, the reindeer looked at her, do you want to become a pirate like Luffy and me one day? He seemed to be listening carefully, because we need a doctor and you would fit perfectly inside the crew. This caused the reindeer to jump back in shock and yell, don't be crazy. I'm a reindeer. Who wants to live with me? He then saw her look at him with sadness. Robin walked up to him and hugged him tightly. "You poor thing. People must have mistreated you so much that you can't bring yourself to trust anyone." The girl then let hit feels. Chopper looked at her and yelled, "What do you mean by that? I have no idea what you're talking about." He then looked away. "Plus, I don't want anything to do with you humans. I'm fine here." Robin smiled sadly. "When I was younger, I eat a devil fruit. Everyone on my island hated me." She remembered the bad memories. "My auntie used to hit me every day because I was a burden to her and her family. She made my life a living hell." She then went on to tell him all of her abuse. The little reindeer gasped, "That sounds so horrible. But how were you able to deal with it?" The girl then told him how the scholars of Ohara took her in as their adoptive daughter, and how she met Luffy, who was her friend for the first time. She then went on to tell him how they both decided to save her island and her life in her new home in the East Blue. The reindeer meanwhile looked at her with a curious look. "But why are you telling all this, human?" The girl smiled, "Because I want you to come with this, silly. You make a perfect fit for the crew." The reindeer was about to rebuff her, but the door was opened by Sanji and Luffy being chased by the doctor. But when they saw Chopper, they began to chase him once more around the castle, much to the tiny reindeer's displeasure. Kureha sat inside the room with Robin, who was chuckling at the whole event. It was funny seeing Luffy interact with their new doctor as he tried to eat him. Kureha looked at her and laughed a little. "Well, aren't you the smart one? What were you doing planting crazy ideas in my assistant's head? Trying to take him away from me, are we?" The girl smiled a little. "No, I just a little bit of myself in him, so I decided to help him." The girl looked outside. "I felt that his heart is bleeding and he needs friends, so I told him to come with us." She looked at the old woman. "I hope that there aren't any problems with that." The woman chuckled. "I have no problem. In fact, you can take him, right now if you want to." She then looked at Avile. "But like you said, his heart is bleeding. His trust was broken time and time again. First by his parents when they abandoned him for his blue nose, and then when he ate the devil fruit. People called him a monster." She then looked at the girl with a sad smile. "Do you think that you can cure his heart?" The girl smiled happily. "I'm sure that I'll make him smile by the end of the day." The woman looked outside at the snow. However, there was only one man that ever talked to him without any fear. He was Chopper's first friend in the world, and he was the one that made him love pirates and was the reason why Chopper gained a big dream. The girl smiled. "Can you tell me about him? He seems like a good man." The woman laughed a little. "Oh, believe me, he was the furthest thing for a good man, though calling him evil will be an exaggeration. He was mostly an ignorant fool with good intentions. He used to do a lot of scams and trick people, but one day, he decided to be a doctor. He was a horrible one." The girl giggled. "I imagine whomever he treated would always end up getting worse." The woman chuckled. "You have no idea, though it was a good boon for my business. I was known as the local doctor who used to fix his screw-ups. He was known by Dr. Hilruck. A crazy quack is what I would name if he was still around. He hoped through cherry blossoms he'd be able to heal people's hearts from the darkness that enveloped them in this kingdom. He was truly weird." The girl smiled. "I suppose that sometimes the greatest of people have weird habits." The woman nodded her head. "One day, he came across Chopper, who was severely injured. At first, Chopper refused to even come near. But the idiot stripped butt naked to prove to him that he didn't mean harm. After that, he healed Chopper and adopted him like a son. He began to tell Chopper about pirates and how they have adventures. He told him about the cure to treat all diseases, and that somebody he'll heal everyone with the cherry blossoms. They became partners in crime." Robin smiled at the story, but she sensed that the happy times were about to be over. However, happy times were about to end because Wapol came to rule after his father's death. The man, for lack of a better term, was a spoiled better. He wanted everything to be his and wanted people to grovel at his feet, so he ordered that all the doctors across the country be killed. The only ones left were me and that quack. The woman shook her head, but it appears that Hilruck came down with a deadly sickness that gave him little time to live. Robin gasped. "Oh dear goodness. That's so horrible. Chopper must have been devastated." The woman nodded her head. "He was, but that was after Hilruck kicked him out because he didn't want him to see him die. I told him about his father's status, but in an attempt to heal him, he killed him even further. Chopper went out and harvested a deadly mushroom thinking it would heal Hilruck due to the similar nature of the skull and crossbones of pirates." The woman sighed. "The man at that point has long accepted his coming death, so he drank it, and went to confront Wapol, who made a state of emergency saying a deadly disease had spread around the kingdom. I don't know what happened there, but from what I heard was that he was relieved that no one was really sick and he took his own life just to not allow Chopper to blame himself." Robin had tears flowing down her eyes at this point. "This sounds so sad." Kureha carried on. "At that point, Chopper arrived there and saw his father's death and tried to avenge him, but Dalton stopped him and told him to leave. He then came to me waving that pirate flag begging me to make him into a doctor." Kureha then said, "You see that hat he wears?" The girl nodded her head. This was the last reminder of Hilruck that was given to him by the man. He holds onto it tightly. With the boys, they were running around the castle, but they seemed to have gotten lost. Sanji then noticed an open door. That door must be the reason why there is so much snow inside. I must close it to make Robin Schwan doesn't feel ill. Luffy punched him upside the head. Stop calling her that. The man glared at him. I'm her boyfriend and only I have the right to give her nicknames. The blonde man grumbled as he walked to the door to close it, but someone yelled, "Stop it, don't close the door." They looked up and saw Chopper on the stairs looking at them. The two ignored him and went to close it, but all they got was the small reindeer training into his muscular form and smashing them both across the head and outside the castle. Didn't I tell you to stop? He then pointed to the top of the door. Look, there. If you close the door, you'll hurt them. Both of the boys looked to the top of the door and saw a bird nest on the top. The boys then ran inside the castle, and Sanji then said, "Wait, did the reindeer just talk?" Luffy then added, he was also walking on 2 feet. They both looked at each other and yelled, "What the hell is happening here?" In the distance Chopper could be seen walking away sadly. Luffy then smiled a little, but he looks so cool, I had to ask him to join my crew. Luffy then ran after him. "Hi reindeer thing, I want you to join my crew. Come on, let's be pirates so we can be friends. We'll have so many adventures. Join me." This once again led to another comedic chase between the boy and the talking reindeer. As Chopper was being chased, he then smelled something. The reindeer growled at the familiar scent. "No way, it can't be possible, Wapol's back." On the mountainside, Wapol could be seen riding his hippo while saying, "No one can defy the king." In Big Horn, a bunch of defeated soldiers was on the ground groaning with pain after Zoro was through with them. The villagers quickly went and dug Dalton out of the snow. One of them said, "Oh no, he's severely injured, what are we going to do?" The doctors that helped Wapol before came and said, "Move aside, we'll help him." The villagers then made a shield with their bem. "Do you think we'll believe you? You're all Wapol's lackeys? We can't trust you with our lives." The doctors tried to explain the situation. "Please calm down. We only served Wapol because we had no other choice. He would have killed us if we didn't. We needed to serve to make sure people wouldn't get sick and have no one to heal them." Nami felt bad for the doctors. She understood what it feels like to work with someone holding an axe on your neck. She then yelled, "Move aside. Let them do their job." The villagers looked at her angrily, but Vivi explained, "Please, let the doctors do their work. I know that you don't trust them, but please remember that they were Wapol's prisoners as much as you people were." The villagers nodded with hesitation. In 5 minutes, Dalton was good as new. It took a while, but he came back to the land of the living and looked around. "What happened here? Why am I in bandages?" He then remembered what happened and jumped. "Where's Wapol? Where did he go? I need to stop him." The doctors then grabbed him saying, "Dalton, sir, please, you need to relax. Your injuries are still fresh and raw. They might get infected again." The man grumbled, but then said, "I had to go to him. I had to stop him." One of the villagers then said, "I heard the lift from the other town was back on. We can use it to ascend the mountain." Dalton didn't wait any longer as he stood and began to head to the lift. Usopp then yelled, "There was a lift this entire time." Back at the castle, Wapol stood in front of the castle and said, "It's sweet to be home. I missed it."